Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. We can get all supervisors to the dais, please. So good morning and welcome to the Tuolumne County Board of Supervisors meeting. A special agenda for today, July 18th, 2024. Just a quick note, special agenda today, we ended up canceling our meeting on Tuesday this last week, just a couple of days ago, primarily, quite honestly, because I was out and unavailable to be here. I was just getting over, unfortunately, another bout with COVID. So not a good thing, but so the meeting is pretty much the same agenda that we were looking at on Tuesday. We just, anytime we make a change and we put the meeting to another day, it becomes a special agenda. So that's how that title is. So the public participation procedures are up on the screens there. And I have asked Miguel from OES to please lead us in the pledge. Are we not up on those screens? And my apologies, I'm not sure on the screens that maybe are the screens in the audience up now? Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, so it's at this point in our meetings that we move to oral communications. As is normal, oral communications is the opportunity for the public to speak on matters that are not on the agenda. I'll repeat that, not on the agenda. If they're on the agenda, you'll have ample opportunity to speak to items as they come up. And I know that it's the public's right to use whatever language they want. By law, they have that right. But I would ask that anybody appearing to speak, to please be considerate of others and show respect and hopefully tone your language down. Other than that, when you come up to the podium, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. And after 2 minutes, you'll hear a tone, which is your alert that you've got 1 minute left. So with that said, I'll look to see if there's any members of the public that would like to speak under oral communications. If so, please come up to the podium. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you. I would love to. And I like the podium over here better than in the middle. So I just think that maybe we should have a little gratitude today. So I want to thank Rebecca Miller-Cripps in this issue of the Weekender this week. She talked about July being No Plastic Month, so we're encouraged not to bring additional plastic into our lives, which is extremely hard to do. And I want to congratulate the Union Democrat. They won several awards at a statewide competition, so good for them. I want to thank the LDS Church. There were some of their elders and some of their kids who came out to clean up a cemetery. And they did such a good job. My understanding is they plan to do another one in the fall, and I hope if they need more volunteers, they'll ask for them so other people can participate. I want to thank Leon Casas for stepping up, who's now the interim CEO at the Senior Center, because they've been leaderless for a few weeks. And I want to thank Mother Nature for making it a little cooler this week. We can actually sleep at night. And for those of you who are riding around town, please notice our crepe myrtles, which are in bloom and look just beautiful. And I want to give a shout out to Tuolumne Parks and Rec. Instead of whining about all the money they could be losing, they're actually going to have a fundraiser. So I congratulate them for their forward thinking. And then we should take a moment and remember Joe Sparagna, His funeral service or celebration of life is going to be this Saturday at 3 p.m. at the Creekside Building at the fairgrounds. He was very active in the Historical Society and the museum, and he was also very active with the Motherlode Fair, and he and his wife actually wrote a book on our Motherlode Fair, and I hope people remember to think of him for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any additional people that would like to speak under oral communications? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to staff reports. So looking for any staff that would like to share information with the board and the public, please come forward and do so. Good morning.
Good morning, Board. Dory Beats, Office of Emergency Services. This is a reminder, always this time of year, we have to be ready. So I want to remind both the public and every one of our county employees, if you have not signed up for emergency alerts, please do so. It is vitally important that we have information to be able to get that information out to you. You can go to our Tuolumne County webpage at the top banner. It says emergency alerts. Click on that, follow the instructions. You can also search on your mobile app under Everbridge or Tuolumne Citizens Alert. You'll have to download the Everbridge app and sign up that way. It is really important that everyone in your household that has a cell phone is registered separately. The way the system works, if you can prioritize between landline, cell phone, email, but it's important that everyone that has a cell phone is signed up because that's the only way for us to be able to reach you in the event of an emergency. So again, I want to encourage, if you have not signed up for emergency alerts, to please do so sooner than later. Thank you.
And thank you. And it is critically important that people sign up for that because it's the opportunity for the county to reach out and give very valuable information. Additional staff reports. Are there any additional? Okay. Seeing none, I will close staff reports and move to the consent calendar. Like to make one comment today, just so that people are aware. Supervisor Half will not be joining us today. I should have said that right off the bat, and I neglected to do so. I apologize. Supervisor Half has got some medical appointments related to her injury that when we changed the board meeting date, it kind of threw things into a quandary for her, so she won't join us today. And so consent calendar, are there any board members that would like to pull any item from consent? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask the clerk to please read the consent calendar.
Item number 1, awarding a contract in the amount of $539,207 to United Pavement Maintenance Incorporated to perform the work as shown in the plans, specifications, and bid book for contract number 1763, Middle Camp Sugar Pine Overlay, and authorizing the chair to sign, included in the fiscal year 24-25 budget. Item number 2, accepting the Enhanced Prevention and Control Funding allocation from the California Department of Public Health, CDPH, Tuberculosis Control Branch, TBCB, in the amount of $1,684 from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025, recognizing unanticipated revenue and increasing appropriations in the same amount in the fiscal year 2024-25 Public Health Department budget, and authorizing the County Administrative Officer to sign all related documents. 4/5 vote required. Item number 3, approving a contract between York Engineering, LLC, and the Tuolumne County Air Pollution Control District for design professional services for AB 2588 Hotspot quality support for services performed in the amount not to exceed $230,000, and delegating signature authority to the county administrator and reducing general fund contingencies, increasing appropriations in the Air Pollution Control District Cost Center, and recognizing unanticipated revenue by the same amount. 4/5 vote required. Item number 4, approving a modification to the Master Stewardship Agreement between the County of Tuolumne and the USDA Forest Service, Stanislaus National Forest, to extend the term of an agreement through January 10th, 2038, and authorizing the county administrator to sign all related documents. Approving item number 5, approving personal actions to include additions, eliminations, reclassifications, conversions, a new job description for Air Pollution Control District Director with the assignment to bargaining unit and various job descriptions as contained in the fiscal 24-25 recommended budget.
Okay, thank you. Is there any comments from board members? Supervisor Campbell, go ahead.
Thank you very much, board. Oops, I just lost what I was doing. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight some of the things on here. There's been a lot of people upset about what's going on in Tuolumne Road, but if you look at this Middle Camp Sugar Pine project that's on the agenda today, I think there's a lot of really positive road projects going on in our county right now. We've got that, Middle Camp Sugar Pine. In the future, we're having Crystal Falls Drive, and then there's the Jamestown Road project, and we're making a lot of progress, I think, with public works and with road improvements. Just trying to highlight that to show people that it's not all bad and that there is a lot of good work going on in the county to shore up our roads, and this item today is evidence of that.
Very good and most applicable. Supervisor Brandon.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to echo that and add, too, when we had LATF money that came in as effectively $5 million that we could put towards anything that we wanted. I think this board's priorities was to put almost 80% of that into road projects and the rest into fire services in an unmet area for need. I think that just shows a lot about the priorities of where we really do put the money that we can into the most important things that we need to do. I wanted to add one additional thing. We're going to be having financial presentations, of course, later today. It talks about a lot of different areas. One of the things we often reference are the mandates that come down that increase our costs every year. I wanted to highlight a couple of items that have a pretty high price tag on here, including the hotspot control program and having to have a qualified air pollution control district manager. These are things that we're required to do. They're expensive. We have 30-some items on a lot of our agendas. Many of them are compliance related with the state. Many of them come with additional costs. Very few of them come with the revenue to cover those costs. So just as an example, as we're looking at it today, we have them even on this agenda. That is one of the things stressing out our budget situation. Somebody asked online, and why don't we just spend better as a fiscal responsibility issue? A lot of that really trickles up to the state of having unreasonable standards for their team, their counties, and not giving us the resources to do the job that they need. And that makes it very challenging year to year. So thank you.
Very good. Good points as well. Supervisor Kirk.
Yeah, it's a small agenda, but there's some real important things in this consent. I'll echo sentiments, what you guys said about the road issue and the lawsuit with the hotspots thing. And then I'll just simply say on number 4, the MSA being extended to 2038. Hopefully there's a lot of funding that comes with that as well, but some great things with the roads, with MSA, and then again, just a reminder that we're getting hit with mandated costs that we got to cover with general fund, and not fun. But thank you, Blossom and team. Sounds like that road might be done here in August, September, so I'm looking forward to that. And again, just those who do the work on the MSA, it's such a big deal to be extending that to 2038. So that's it. Thank you.
And so I'll join in echoing the comments of my fellow supervisors, and particularly on the number 4, the Master Stewardship Agreement. It's been an incredible effort. It's exciting to see that we're extending this out 10 years. They've done fantastic work, and I know they will continue to do so. So that's really good. At this time, I'll call for public comment on the consent calendar. Are there any items that people would like to speak to?
Good morning,
Good
Tracy
morning.
Riggs, County Administrator's Office. You were just handed out, and there are some in the back of the room, In the memo, and for item number 5, it goes through the personnel actions that are contained in the budget, but we had not gone through the meet and confer process. We've gone through that process. The point of me coming up today is that what we just handed out to you is contained in the memo and in the chart in the memo, but we did not get you the actual class spec with the changes. So I want to make sure that you know you have the class spec. It was really a lot of cleanup, but this has also been approved by the union and is ready to move forward. Thank you.
Very good, and thank you for the additional information.
Sorry,
Yeah.
if I could jump in, just FYI, on the class characteristics, looks like there might be a little typo we got to address on the very first line, the very last word in the sentence, just FYI. Yeah.
Good catch. Any additional public comment on the consent calendar? Good morning again.
Thank you. For the benefit of the public, I would like someone to expand on item number 2, because I've kind of been wondering how come we never talk about TB in this county. So if there is someone here who could talk about that, I'd appreciate that.
I see somebody stepping up. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Rebecca Edmonds, Tuolumne County Public Health Department. I can speak to this
Great.
funding. So this is a funding source through the California Department of Public Health Tuberculosis Control Branch. And historically, we've received funding in any given fiscal year if the previous year we had a confirmed tuberculosis case in Tuolumne County. That's quite rare. And so after several counties advocating with CDPH, they, starting this year, are starting to offer a small amount of base funding each year. And that funding will go up if we do have a tuberculosis case in our county. So it's a small amount of funding, but it is contributing towards our communicable disease public health nurses' salary to conduct tuberculosis surveillance activities in our county, planning, following up on potential cases, et cetera.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate the explanation, and hopefully we will not see additional funding because that would be a bad thing, right? So let's leave it where it's at. So thank you. Any additional public comment on the consent calendar? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board and be looking for a motion.
Chair, I'll move we approve of the consent.
I'll second.
So I have a motion by Supervisor Campbell, a second by Supervisor Brandon, and we don't need a roll call vote. We can just vote. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries 4-0 with Supervisor half absent. All right. So next item on the agenda is item number 6 is under committees and commissions. So if I could have the clerk please read that item.
Item number 6, consideration of appointing the at-large member of the Tuolumne County Planning Commission with a term set to expire on February 15th, 2025.
Okay, very good. So in going over the memo in this document here, we, due to circumstances as indicated in the memo, we had a resignation of one of the members of the Planning Commission. And so that opened up an at-large position. And so the county staff did the appropriate thing, advertising, bring in the board names. We have a total of 5 applicants that came to us. And did you have additional information to share?
No, I think you covered it all. I would just add that with only 5 members of a 7-member committee, it's been a little difficult to get quorums and get things going. So we would hope that you could appoint the at-large member.
Absolutely. So I would. I'm gonna reach to the board here for comments, but I wanted to make a couple of comments myself first. In that I reviewed all 5 applicants, and a couple of them. They had good experience, but they had not been in the county very long. And so that caused me some concern as far as, being on the Planning Commission. One applicant I had some concerns with because it came from a developer standpoint, and I think that that's not a positive thing to have a developer on our planning commission. My own personal feelings in looking at everything is that I very much would like to recommend Jerry Morrow to fill the outstanding slot. Jerry has got a tremendous amount of experience. He's been on the Planning Commission for a long time. He's current statewide president of the California Planning Group and has been for a couple of years now. And Jerry is one of the only people that I've seen who reliably went out on each and every project and looked at them himself in order before he made any decisions. So I really respect that. And with that, I'll look to the board if they have additional comments. Supervisor Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. So very similar preamble. I reviewed all the applicants. Really grateful that there was a lot of interest from the community in this. I think that any one of the applicants has qualities that they could bring to the Planning Commission. But when I look at everything in totality and the experience level, I agree with your assessment. I think Jerry Morrow, the fact that he is the current president of the State Planning Commissioners Association, he has actually brought the Planning Commissioners Association meeting to Tuolumne County, so he's actually brought some state level focus onto our county. He's in charge of the next conference that they're having in, I think it's in San Luis Obispo this year. He's been, I think he's been on the Planning Commission longer than any other current member. So you have that level of experience, and you know, not pointing fingers. We have had an issue with people with attendance on the Planning Commission, and Jerry is very consistently present there to vote and make his voice heard and do the research and make sure that he's representing the community well. So I think he would be my choice as the at-large position.
Thank you. Supervisor Brandon.
Great, thank you. This was a bit of a difficult choice for me. There's actually two on there, and I agree. It was very reassuring to see that we had a lot of interest in this. It's a very important job, and I'd like to reassure the board, too, that I'm continuing to have discussions on the District 5 position with a number of individuals to get them to apply as well. Looking at the candidates that we have here, I would draw a contrast with my opinion about one of them. There is a developer that has applied with a lot of experience doing projects. I think that has been a challenge with our current Planning Commission, is a lack of tangible experience within the building sector. But I do agree with the conclusion that Jerry, in particular, Morrow, has been a very good planning commissioner. He's been on there. He's been reliable. In addition to the many years that he's served, he is in a leadership position with the California State Planning Commissioners Association, of which he's served several. And I think that that does need to be recognized. For the application from Mr. Koff, I would highly recommend, though, reapplying in the future, because I think that is a skill set that is very much needed. And so between two candidates that I thought would be very good on here, I'm going to be supporting Jerry with that. But not to say that that is not appreciated, that we had the offer there and that that would be valuable.
Thank you. Supervisor Kirk, did you have anything?
Yeah, and I did, just to be careful, I did reach out to Mr. Koff this morning to confirm, and he actually was going to be withdrawing his application, so that might make it a little bit easier. So, but yeah, Mr. Koff, please reapply. I actually feel a little different about Mr. Koff. I know some people may see him as polarizing or have opinions, but our board is very pro-growth, smart growth, housing, and I think the more eyes we have on that committee and in general with housing, the better it is for trying to achieve some of our goals. So please, Ron, when you're eligible, apply again, but I will agree with the other three members. Jerry Morrow, he is the president of the California Planning Commission. He's been on there long. He is reliable. So I absolutely will lend my hand to moving him into that position. He is currently in the D1 position, but moving him to that at-large I think will serve better, and especially with an election coming up and with a new D1 supervisor, I think it also paves the way for them to have an opportunity to potentially, bring their person on board. So, Jerry Morrow it is.
Okay, very good. And my comment about developers on the Planning Commission, I still stand by that. It has nothing to do with Ron Kopp's, experiences, because he can and certainly would bring a lot of value, but I just have an inherent concern with that on the Planning Commission. So I will look to for public comment on this item. Good morning and welcome again.
Thank you again. So I have appeared before you a number of times talking to you about the current state of your planning commission. So I'm a little confused because Jerry Morrow currently, thank you, Mr. Kirk, currently holds a District 1 position. So he can't hold two. So I know he had planned to resign that and apply for the at-large. So I don't know how you're going to handle that if he's holding two at the same time. And I also agree with the comments of Mr. Goldenberg and some of the others. I have a concern about appointing someone to the Planning Commission who could potentially have to recuse themselves many times, because that is not beneficial either. And I think Jerry Morrow, I started going to Planning Commission meetings like in 2013, and Jerry Morrow was on the commission then. And he and Bob Stone were the only two people on the Planning Commission that I ever saw that actually went out to projects. And they went everywhere. They went to Groveland, they went wherever. And right now you currently have some planning commissioners who don't know what their role is, who don't know what their job is, and pick up their packets right before the meeting. And that's an embarrassment, especially for people who are getting a stipend. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment on this item? So I'll bring it back to the board. I would like to point out, though, I'm looking forward to Supervisor Brandon, you coming up with a person for District 5. That'll help, definitely, and hopefully we could see that very shortly on an upcoming board agenda. So I would look for Supervisor Campbell. Go ahead.
And just some real brief clarification, Natalie. So my assumption, and you know what happens when you assume things, is that if Jerry is chosen today, that he would be resigning from his District 1 position and then segueing into the at-large position. And so by the next meeting, he'd be at-large, not District 1. So there wouldn't be any overlap where he's holding two seats at the same time.
Yes, that's correct. He was waiting to see if he would be appointed before he resigned from that position. And then we would have to post the vacancy for the D1 position.
Okay, that's a good idea not to leave the dock until you have your foot on the boat. Okay, and just to add, I'm just, hopefully it doesn't, I'm not in opposition to appointing people with any kind of development background. I think that could be an asset. I think the reason why I am supporting Jerry in this case is because I think he just has an overwhelming amount of experience, but I don't want people that have developed projects to be discouraged from applying, because I think that really could bring some valuable experience to the Planning Commission.
Okay, very good. Well, I'll look for a motion.
I'll make the motion to approve the application for Jerry Morrow to the at-large Planning Commission position.
I'll second.
So I have a motion by Supervisor Brandon, seconded by Supervisor Campbell. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, thank you very much. And please proceed with posting the District 1. All right. So, moving forward on our agenda. If the clerk could please read item number 7 under County Administration.
Item number 7, presentation on financial trends and forecasts.
Very good. So I see staff is gathering together here, so you guys need a couple of minutes to get situated? Okay.
While you're, if I may real quick, Liz, while you guys are preparing, is there anything different from today's with the 18th versus yesterday's with the 17th?
No.
No difference?
No, so we did make some updates subsequent to the posting of the agenda to the attachment. So what you have on the dais includes those changes, and there are copies in the back.
But the one I got yesterday is
Correct.
the same.
That's right.
All right, take her away.
Turn it on, Donnie. All right. Good morning. Tracy Riggs, County Administrator's Office. With me is Liz Peterson, Deputy County Administrator, Debbie Batista, our retired Auditor Controller, and Donnie McNair, the Chief Assistant Auditor Controller. And just to start things off, this was definitely an effort of many people to bring this report to you today. There are a lot of worksheets that both Auditor's Office keeps and our office keeps. And then Sean Cole, who's not sitting up here with us, who is in the audience, and I hopefully you've had a chance to meet him. He got to take a lot of those worksheets that all of us were sending him and combine them and try and make sense of them. And then, of course, Liz put the presentation together for us. So we're thankful that everyone was able to help. And also, a huge appreciation to Donnie and Debbie for they're always our second set of eyes, so it's another place where we're pulling things that they're checking to make sure that we're all balancing and that we're coming into numbers that are at least close, if not specifically right on. There's a couple things I wanted to talk about real quick, is what you're seeing before you today is what we use to help lead us to a high-level forecast going forward, which is what your board had asked for. We also have all of these are trends based on actual expenses and positions that you'll see. So they're not forecasted, they are actual expenses that have been posted in the finance system. And then finally, we've had a lot of questions on it, which is fantastic. We did present this to both our department head team and budget team before we posted it so we could get their input. And then we do plan to do a few employee forums so that they also can have a chance to ask us some questions on this. This report is not meant to cause panic. Debbie and I have been talking. We cannot think of a year in which we've ever done a forecast or in which departments submit their budgets that we don't end up with a shortfall when that comes in. There's always more wants, more needs, more desires than there is revenue to keep up. But what happens is each year, we just have to work the problem. And what we're finding, I think, is we have a lot of newer staff and even department heads who aren't necessarily used to the year after year after year of a projected shortfall. But that is always where we start, and then we start working the problem. And then finally, the numbers before you, we have presented these, and they have come to you in the past, but in pieces. We've shown you revenue. We've shown you increased, like 5 to 7 years at a time. We've shown you expenses, salaries and benefits. Last year in May, we brought before you, Debbie and our office brought before you PARs so that we could do the Section 115, and you were provided the PERS information at that time. We showed you 2 years of what our PERS, what we had in what our actuarial said we had as a liability, what our assets were, what the unfunded amount was, and then we also then talked about the stabilization program, and Debbie will get more into that later. So all of this now is bringing it into one place for your board to see and ask questions. And then as we move through it, the idea was building the information to get to that point where we could do a forecast. So with that being said, most of the talking I think is going to be with Liz and Debbie, and then we'll chime in on an as-needed basis. So thank you for the time today.
All right, so just to summarize what we're going to be presenting today, the first thing we're going to talk about is just, as Tracy mentioned, this presentation is almost exclusively on our actuals, so what we actually spent. But we did just add a couple slides in here just to talk over an overview of the county's budget, and specifically the recommended budget that your board approved in June, just to talk about like the budget and how it's broken out by fund. So you'll see just a little bit of that. Then we'll talk about our liabilities and our debt. Then we'll have an overview of our general revenues, the history of what we've pulled in for our general revenues, as well as the trends that we're seeing. Then we'll talk about departmental revenues and the history and those trends. And we'll talk specifically about the general fund. That was the direction that your board gave, is that really wanted to focus on the general fund. So we'll talk about salaries and benefits, as well as services and supplies, the history and the trends. Then we'll talk about allocated positions in all funds, and then kind of drilling down into the general fund. And then we will get ultimately to, with all of that data, using the history and the trends, then we build a multi-year forecast. And so we'll get to that at the end. So first thing we're going to talk about is the 24-25 recommended budget just by fund. So the county's budget, like all counties, is comprised of three types of funds. So the first fund is governmental, then enterprise, and then internal service. Within governmental funds, there's the general fund, and that, of course, is where a majority of our operating services are categorized under. So things like the sheriff's office, the libraries, recreation, animal control, probation, majority of the departments that we work with. Then there's the capital funds. That includes county capital. It also includes like our road construction capital. And then there's the special revenue funds. Those are funds like social services, behavioral health, the road maintenance fund, the fire fund. And those are funds that have specific revenues, state and or federal allocations, where we'll get to that in a second, but they have specific revenues that are used for those purposes. Then there's the enterprise funds. Those funds operate more like a business, and you have the ambulance, the solid waste, and then the airports are enterprise funds. And then lastly is the internal service funds. Those are all of our like what we refer to them as our mandated costs. We allocate those out, but things like our PERS fixed payment, or our workers' comp costs, or our liability insurance, or our newer IT internal service fund that we've started building. So in total, the recommended budget that your board approved was $286,824,648. But the board has discretion over $64 million of that. And that's of the revenue that your board has discretion over how to spend $64 million of that $286 million budget. That revenue is the general revenues. Those are primarily taxes, and then other fees that we bring in. And so it's that revenue that's used for general fund operations and services. It's also, your board transfers out a little bit to capital. This year it was $1 million, and then a little bit to county fire as well. And then all other funds, as I mentioned, they have dedicated revenues, and they have mandates and programs which must be spent for those specific services. So as an example, the board cannot move funding from the behavioral health fund to the road fund to pave more roads. Behavioral health and the road, they are special revenue funds. The revenue that those funds get must stay in those funds. And this is just an example. I'm sorry, the formatting is very weird here. Sorry about that. But this is an example. You can see the general fund and what the budgets were for those. This is, again, the recommended budget. This is bothering me. And then the list of the capital funds, and then all of the governmental funds. We have them listed there. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but this just shows, again, that $286 million budget and how it's all spread out across all of the funds. Here are the enterprise funds and the budgets that were approved in the recommended budget, and then, of course, the internal service funds. And I just want to mention here, the first column there, or the second column there, the expense line, that's what the budget that your board approved. All of these internal service funds carry a fund balance, and that is because we have unanticipated expenses throughout the year, and we utilize the fund balance to, say liability self-insurance as an example. If something were to come up, then we can pull from fund balance to cover that. And then, of course, that is also what we use for cash flow. By we, I mean Debbie's office, the auditor's office, throughout the year as we're, spending money and then waiting for, say, reimbursements for grants in particular or other things. So that's why there's fund balances remaining in the internal service funds. Okay, so that's just one kind of overview of the budget overall, and then I'm going to pass it over to Debbie to talk about our liabilities and our debts.
You.
There you go.
Great. I was going to say I have no strength. So I get to start out with the big elephant that's always in the room, and that's PERS. So PERS is our biggest unfunded liability for most governmental jurisdictions. Their retirement system, not everybody is in PERS. Some people have their own plans, LA County. Some people are under what's called a 1937 Act for their retirement system.
Can we pass the other mic, maybe?
So other entities have what's called a 1937 Act counties. That's like Stanislaus County and San Joaquin County. We are in PERS. We have two different units in PERS. We have the miscellaneous unit, which is most of our county employees that are like everybody in this building, and then we also, and almost all employees other than public safety. Public safety is most of the sheriff's office, not everybody in the sheriff's office, probation, and the juvenile center. So anybody who carries a gun or is sworn in is going to be in public safety, and then anybody that deals with corrections are going to be in public safety. Those are our two units. The difference between the two units is that for the miscellaneous group, the county contracts with PERS solely on our own. The miscellaneous group that we have is with us and PERS. For the safety group, way back in the late 1990s, PERS decided they didn't want 2,000 plus all small contracts. So they put anybody who had less than 100 employees in the pool. So our safety employees, even though we have gone over 100 employees, are still in a pool and not our own. Also, we have done some PERS or public employee retirement reform. That's PEPRA. And if one is hired on or after January 1st, 2013, one is in the PEPRA tier, which for us is tier 3. The county of Tuolumne was a little progressive, and we decided to do some pension reform before that. So in 2011, if one was hired on or after March 13th, 2011, we had a second tier, which is our second tier. When everybody who's in tier 1 retires, we'll no longer have tier 1, but we'll always, well, not always, but probably the next 50 to 60 years, we're going to have tier 2, and then forever you'll have tier 3 until there's new retirement. So So if you look at, here's a history of our unfunded liability. We've put all of the tiers together. One of the biggest functions of PERS is to invest our money. There's positives and negatives part of that. In order for us to break even, PERS currently has to earn 6.8%. In years that they earn a lot more, if you look in 2021, they earn 21.3%. You'll see that big drop. We made $40 million on our investment. Unfortunately, the next year they lost 6.3 and we lost money. So we are at the mercy of how PERS invests. And the last couple of years, that has not been as positive for everybody as it could be. But if you look at the this, we're $160 million of unfunded liability with all two units, all three tiers. The next page or the next slide shows you the active employees as of the very first payroll of July. So it didn't include last payroll. And as you can see, we're doing well, that we're starting to move people from tier 1, tier 2 down to tier 3. And in the safety unit, because we have a lot of younger deputies, we have the majority of the people in the tier 3. That's really helpful. The other thing we want to show is that we kind of did a comparison between 2011 and 2022. And if you look, our count for the miscellaneous group actually went down by about 54 people that were active. But remember, we were slowly closing, well, in 2011, we were finishing up closing down the medical facilities that we had at Tuolumne General Hospital. The average age is not that far off. We've gone from 48 to 40, or from 48 to 46. The average age of employees entering is 38 to 38. But the number of years of service is going down. Our current employees have 7 average years of service, and in 2011, they had almost 10. This is the most telling factor, is that in 2011, the annual payroll per person was $48,000. In 22, it's $63,000. So it's increased almost $15,000, but that's in 11 years. And this is the area where the county of Tuolumne is receiving its biggest hits. If you look at 2011, we had 889 people retired and or their beneficiaries receiving pension from our PERS. But in 2022, we had 1,214, or we've increased by 325 people. Also, the average age is going up, which one would expect, but what's the average benefits is going from $10,000 to $16,000, but the payout, it went from $9 million a year to $19.5 million a year, or an increase of $10 million per year. And remember, this is as of June 22. I will tell you that June 23 will be out in August, and we'll have some new numbers for you, and they'll all be more. So PERS recognized that there was a lot of entities that had problems with their unfunded liabilities. So before 2018, they would make a piece of your yearly percentage that you paid for PERS to cover your unfunded liability, but it wasn't working. So then in 2018, they came up and drew a line in the sand and decided that they would take your unfunded liability through the actuary, amortize it over 30 years, and come up with a payment that you had to make every single year, and that's what we call our fixed payments. So if you look at 2018, it was a little bit about $4.2 million. On Monday morning, we will be making a payment to PERS of $12 million. And that number is only going to go up. And one of the things that you, the board, did was come up with the ability for us to pay down our PERS. We've paid 2 additional payments in PERS, $1 million in 23 and $1 million in 24. The $1 million that we paid in 23 changed our fixed payment by $64,000 in 24. So in 1 year, we got back the 64 plus all of the savings, because remember now, that 6.8 we don't have to earn on the $1 million. We will save hundreds and thousands of dollars by doing that. When PERS gives us their actuarial, they actually will forecast what our fixed amount is every single year. And every single year when I get the new one, it's different than the year before, and it's always more money. So this is showing you the fixed amounts and the amounts that they're projecting for 26 to 30, and you can see that it's just still going up. PERS was hoping that it would flatten out in the early 20 and mid 20s, like right now. That's not working out. And like I said, in August when we get the new report, I will guarantee you that those 13, 14, 15, $18 million will be more money. So that's our PERS, and there's things that we can do with PERS, definitely making the additional payments, setting up the Section 115 doesn't help with our PERS unfunded liability, but what it does help is give the CAO and the board and the departments the ability in future, if we have some really stressful years, to be able to draw down that money and pay into PERS. The other thing is, don't let that money just sit in that bank account. If you really don't have bad years, really use it to pay down your PERS in the future. Right now, we have $1 million in our Section 115 plan for PERS, and we have $1 million in our Section 115 for other post-employee benefits. So the next thing we want to look at is our liability insurance, and you can see that it's been growing and fluctuating. This is the net expense because we receive refunds and we receive some rebates based upon our premiums. But think about all of the buildings that we've added. Think about just the storms and our payouts. And so that's going to affect our leave liability. Again, one can look at that. One can look at the premiums and change the premiums. I'm not sure you want to go to 100% self-insurance, but you definitely have some abilities to look at it and manage. But just remember, then the leave liability fund has to have more cash in it if you bring up the premiums, and you're going to be paying higher premiums for any incidences.
Debbie, can I ask a clarifying question, and maybe to Tracy? This goes to 2023. We just had the budget, of course, for 24. The number was being thrown around was about $4 million. Is that still, would that go from where it's at right here, 2.4 to $4 million?
Remember, we're reporting on actuals, and 24 has not been closed out. So she's working, but yes, the premium is the premium, and what we expect is still there. We haven't.
We just paid it yesterday.
Yeah, we don't have anything different to show, but this is because the actuals in the year was closed out in 23.
Okay, thank
That's
you.
why you have that. Who's doing next?
Sure. Okay, our other fixed liabilities is our debts. We have 3 different bonds. In 2006, the county entered into a judgment bond for the Jamestown mine site. In 2014, when we were looking at our PERS and our side fund, when PERS put everybody into the pool, they would come up with the side fund that said that's your unfunded liability. And again, they were trying to have the side fund be paid off by increasing rates. But because we have a tier 2, we didn't have enough employees in tier 1 to pay off or even put a dent in the side fund. The side fund was actually growing by a couple $100,000 a year. So we decided to draw a line, the board at that time decided to draw a line in the sand, and we got a pension bond to pay that off. And then we also have the Law and Justice Center, and that we entered into that in 2018. And these are the original amounts of the bonds, and then the net, the principal balance that we have due in 24. And then the next slide just shows you shows you the actual costs that we've had on our debt service. And again, the big jump is when we went into the Law and Justice Center. And then the next slide just shows you the forecast in the future of what our payments are going to be. Part of the Law and Justice Center was $3 million for some IT projects, but because we didn't believe that the IT projects would have a life of 30 years, we actually had them paid down in 5 years, so we are almost done with that. Or 10 years, I'm sorry. We're almost done with that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about our general revenues. Okay, first we're going to talk about property tax. Your board has seen this slide before. This just compares the percentage of the counties, of Tuolumne County's land that is public land compared to our neighboring counties. And we added in the acres too, just so you can really see. Of course, this really means we are significantly limited in the amount of property or land that we have to develop on in Tuolumne County, again, as compared to our neighbors. Okay, and then this just sort of really highlights that. So 77% of the land is publicly managed. For the federal portion of that, which is like 75%, we receive payment in lieu of taxes, or PILT, which is a federal like allocation that we get. This year it is $3.1 million. And then for the remaining 23% of our land, we are estimating in the recommended budget estimate of receiving property tax in the amount of $35,128,467. So you can really see how disproportionate it is and how challenging it is to be a large public lands county in our ability to generate property tax. This is, I'm going to turn this over to Deb.
One of the things that we've talked about in the past is what's called ERAFT, or the Educational Revenue Augmentation Fund. So in 1992, a part of all of the realignments activities that the state did was that they came up with a plan where the county, the city of Sonora, and all of the special districts would allocate some money of their property tax to the schools, and then the state would pay the schools that same amount less. So the winner in the ERAF funds is not the schools, it's the state of California. So if you look at that in 2024, $10 million of your property tax that that you all could spend in any way that you wanted to, we allocate to the schools. You don't have the ability to do that. The schools do not get extra money, and the state of California pays our schools $10 million less. And this is just showing the county share. There's a couple more $1 million from all the other jurisdictions. I don't know that one could get this undone, but this is a lot of money, of our local money, that is in essence, the state of California is using to lower their liability. And it would be nice to be able to get it back. I just don't know how one would be able to do that other than legislatively.
Okay, so a little more on property tax. Again, your board has seen this slide before, but so because of ERAF and some of the other things that we've discussed, of all of the property tax that's collected or really paid in Tuolumne County by residents, only 26% comes to the county for services. The rest is distributed in this way, as you can see. And then this is all of the history of the property tax that we have received. And I just want to mention, when we talk about our revenues, we are speaking about the revenues that we estimated in year end, because again, the books have not been closed yet. And then we are also speaking about next year, our forecast in the recommended budget. So those two are not actuals, but everything else is actuals in this presentation. So we will come back to the board, at the adopted with our actual numbers for revenue. But overall, you can see property tax increases. It's pretty steady. I'm sorry again for the formatting. There's pretty steady increases, except for during times of recession. It's slow and steady is how I would categorize that. And you can see that here on this chart. Kind of went down during the recession years, and then it's just slowly gone up. Okay, sales tax. Again, your board has seen this slide before, but our sales tax rate is the lowest in the state, the lowest legally allowed at 7.25%. And of that rate, 6% of it, or $6 for every $100, or 6 cents on the dollar, goes to the state. $1 goes to, or 1% goes to the county for services, and then 25 or 0.25% goes to TCTC. You can see here sort of a history of the sales tax that we've collected in the last since 2008. It is highly volatile based on local conditions. That's kind of the conclusion that we've drawn, or that we always draw. When we, as the revenue team, we meet every year, actually multiple times a year, to project and forecast what we anticipate future revenues will be. Our conversation is almost primarily centered on what are those local considerations that we can predict or that we might be able to predict, and therefore how will those impact our local revenues. So as you can see, our sales tax is impacted by fires, obviously by the recession. It is also impacted by increased tourism. So as tourists come and we see an increase in TOT, we also see an increase in sales tax. But you can see those few years there where we had an increase. We had significant construction projects going on. So not only at the Law and Justice Center, but the courthouse, the regional detention facility, as well as Adventist Health and the bypass. So all of that means people are buying materials here locally, and we see an increase in our sales tax, as well as our tree mortality projects. We had, millions and millions of dollars and many, many contractors doing tree mortality. County was doing work, but also PG&E and others. And so we saw an uptick in sales tax. Here it is by the numbers. You can see it's pretty significant swings year over year. Overall, the 17-year average annual increase, so the annual increase across all of the 17 years was 7.1%. The last 5 years, it was an average increase of 10%. But if we look at the last 3 years, it's actually a reduction in 0.5%. So it just, again, shows how volatile sales tax is and also how dependent it is on those local factors. And here's TOT, similar to sales tax, although, I want to point out that we had the voters passed an increase to the sales or the TOT rate in 2010 to increase it from 8% to 10%. And then you can see in 2022 where they increased it again and how that had a significant effect on the TOT that we collected. But then you can also see, again, construction and people coming from out of town, booking our hotels for like a month at a time, as well as we started to see some major development in the Highway 120 corridor in 2017. And then you can see that dip there in 2020. That was in early COVID, when everyone was really staying home. Well, as soon as kind of like summer hit of 2020, we really saw a ramp up in tourism, and you can see that reflected here. We were fortunate, one of the fortunate counties where people came to visit rather than some of the others like in the Bay Area where they were leaving. And then this is just the growth over year. You can see the actuals there, and as well as our year-end estimates, as well as our forecast for next year. I'll go back here and just highlight. You can see 24 and then our estimate for 25. Granted, these are not actuals, but this is sort of what we're seeing, and what we anticipated we would see is sort of that leveling off a bit of the TOT growth. It's certainly still growing, there's no doubt about it, but not to the degree that we had seen in the last couple years. So the 17-year average annual increase is 12%, the 5-year is 17%, and then the 3-year is 5.45% increase. And then I'll turn this over to Debbie to just speak about A87. A87 is not a tax, but it is an additional revenue that comes into the general revenues that is used for general fund services.
Okay, A87 is the ability for us to be able to charge indirect costs. There are 6 or 7 departments, the CAO's office, HR, the auditor, controller, treasurer, tax collector, IT, facilities management, that we get to allocate our costs to all of the other departments, all the other funds, and they can use that allocation when they apply for grants. DSS, when they do their quarterly claims, gets to claim that indirect cost. So what we do is, for anybody who is not in the general fund, we charge them that A87 and it comes into the general fund as a revenue. Departments that are in the general fund get to use their A87 on grants, on other abilities. The veterans, we get to claim a little piece of their 87 and get the funding for them. We don't charge and give the money back to the general fund, but you can see how the A87 has been growing. A lot of that is how the calculations are done. Some of the calculations are done based upon the department's budget. So if you have those departments where their budgets are really increasing because they're adding staff like DSS and health and BH, then what's going to happen is then they're going to get a bigger piece of the 87. We have done a couple things to bring down the 87. We set up a new internal service fund for IT and put most of the costs into that internal service fund that is shared with all the other departments. And so therefore you're going to be charged as a department the actual cost or the cost based upon this year, and it won't be allocated through the 87, and that will bring down the 87 costs to those other outside general fund departments. Also, we've added all the different homeless departments in either new funds or new departments. They will now start having a piece of the 87. So that will bring down some of the costs. The biggest allocation to the 87 is to Department of Social Services, Public Works, Behavioral Health. And so hopefully they will start seeing a little bit of reprieve. Also, the departments have the option to have those departments bill them directly, and then they get credit for that. The biggest department that asks for people to bill them directly is the Department of Social Services.
Okay, so this is just a history overall of our general revenues. Again, these general revenues are the things that your board has discretion over how they are spent. You can see the trend. It is definitely, for the most part, a slow increase, except for the recession. This is the growth overall. And then you can see the 17-year average annual increase is about 3%. The last 5 years, it has grown on an average of 7% a year. And then the last 3 years on an average of 6%. We did take out, there's some revenues that the general fund or that come into the general revenues line, and then they have to be passed through to social services, behavioral health, and so this accounts for that. Overall, these trends, we kind of talked about a little bit, but general revenues do increase about 7% average annually over the last 5 years. Our other revenue sources, like outside of the taxes, are less volatile, but they do grow more slowly. Property tax, as I mentioned, is certainly the most steady, of course, unless we're in a recession. Sales tax is definitely the most volatile and experiences the greatest fluctuations from local factors as well as tourism. That just makes it, when we have volatile revenues, it makes it very challenging to predict year over year what we might be seeing. And as I mentioned, all Tuolumne County general revenues fluctuate based on changes to the local community. As an example, when we were compiling all of this data, we noticed an increase in sales tax by 20% when we had a new car dealership open a handful of years ago in the unincorporated area of Tuolumne County. And so it's little things like that, which that's not so little for us, but it's, you know, maybe relatively you might not think it has such an impact on our general revenues, but things like that really do. And also our general revenues are not necessarily impacted by state budgets or state spending. Our departmental revenues definitely are. And then outside of property tax, as I mentioned, predicting revenue is just challenging because there's a lot of variables that go into it. And again, a lot of local considerations, things like fires that we may not even be able to predict that have an impact. Okay, we're going to move to departmental revenues now. So these departmental revenues are things like allocations that departments get for services that they're mandated to provide. Their fees for service when they charge for, you know, whatever services they're providing, or maybe like grants that they get in. These are specific. You can see the departmental revenues here. These are specific to the general fund. We broke these out by function, and the functions are actually a categorization that the state controller's office sets up, that we are required when we submit our reports, our budget reports to the state. They have to be categorized by function like this. And so we kept it that way, so it's not necessarily by department, but there was a second attachment on the agenda, and it categorizes, so we listed every department in the general fund and then in the other funds, categorized by function. So you'll be able to see when we say protection, it obviously does not include fire, as you see there on the list, because fire is not in the general fund, as your board knows, but it includes all of your typical public protection departments that you might think of, but it also includes ag, it also includes community development department, and many others, because they're focused on the health and safety of the community, not necessarily law enforcement, but code enforcement, for example. We also took out, you can see that blue line, the Master Stewardship Agreement, tree mortality, our fuel reduction grants, our OES grants that we've received. Those technically fall in the purple line there under general government, but that was really skewing those numbers, and those are grants exclusively, grant funded. There's no cost to the general fund there, so we took those out just so it wouldn't sort of artificially inflate the general government function departmental revenues. But overall, so you can see sort of the growth over the years of departmental revenues. Public protection certainly, or protection, you can see there's a growth. The others are pretty steady, maybe some slight growth here and there, but yeah. And then so here they are by the numbers, and again, this excludes those MSA and OES grants that we've received over the years. So overall, we see an increase of about 3% annually over the course of the 15 years. The last 5 years, average annual increase is 5%. The last 3 years is 6.75%. I would anticipate that the last 3 years, why we saw growth in departmental revenues, is because of COVID funding that some of our departments received. I think like the sheriff's office or the jail in particular received some funding to house some of the state inmates. So things like that. Yeah, so then these are the other funds, non-general fund, and I know it's a lot, but so just a few. Again, these are broken out. These are actually broken out by fund. You can see like the black one, for example, those spikes, that's in the capital fund, and you can see those spikes come from when we completed construction or when we were working on construction at the juvenile facility and then at the jail. You can see that slight dip in kind of a olive green. That's when we started receiving SB1 revenue for our road fund. And then say like the kind of yellowish one there for social services, they received some significant funding for COVID and other things. And so you can, that shows, revenue for fire, for example, in that magenta color. It's mostly steady. You can see that increase now and kind of moving toward 23 because of the ARP, LATCF funding that your board contributed. Okay, and then here are those numbers, and then this is all of the other funds kind of combined together, so it doesn't, yeah. And you can see, again, overall, there's an increase in departmental revenues, for sure, no doubt about it. Yeah. Okay, then we're going to move to salaries and benefits, and again, specifically right now, looking at the general fund. This is a chart of just regular salaries, so that is the sort of the base wage, hourly rate, salaries. That includes overtime, part-time salaries, and regular salaries. It does not include any benefits on here. So you can see overall the increase, and again, just the general fund. Over the last couple years, you can see specifically the increase over the last 3 years, an average annual increase of about 10%. And I think that's obvious that the board made very significant investments in public safety, and that's reflected there. Now, while this is the overall full general fund, you can see the board made more than 10% investments in a lot of our public safety positions, but overall, once that's spread out among all of the other non-public safety positions, it evened out to an average of about 10% over the last 3 years. And then this is all salaries and benefits. So that includes everything like, PERS and our FICA that we pay and our, cafeteria and everything like that. So you can see how we saw the increase over the years. Again, still a significant increase over the last 3 years. So overall, in the last 17 years, we saw an annual average increase of 3%. That's it. Sorry. Okay, and then we're going to talk about services and supplies. So these are those things like some of our mandated costs, like our liability insurance cost is included in the services and supplies. Other things like training or vehicles or utilities, rent or a lot of those other operating things. I mean, this is kind of everything else for a department to operate. A lot of those mandated costs, the IT mandated costs, purchasing mandated costs, our phones, So you can see the growth of those over the years. Again, this excludes the MSA and OES, and again, this is just general fund. But you can definitely see there's been an increase, an average annual increase over the last 3 years, especially of 13%. And again, some of this may likely have been offset by departmental revenues that came in, again, those grants perhaps, but definitely we're seeing an increase in our services and supplies. That's just the reality of things cost more, and particularly as we have more mandates and as we have additional, things like our liabilities you just heard about, that gets spread out to the departments. As that goes up, services and supplies and departments go up too. This is just that chart, the trend that we just talked about. So the blue line at the top, salaries and benefits, and then the green, services and supplies over the years. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about positions, or allocated positions. This actually, most of the data we're showing goes back to 2008 because that's sort of when the recession, or right before the recession started. But we actually had the data from 87 for allocated positions, and we just thought it was good to show kind of some of those peaks and valleys that we've had. But of course, primarily the peak and the valley was because we had a hospital that we used to fully operate, as well as other medical facilities and services that we would provide. And so if you exclude those medical facilities and services that we used to provide, that's the line on the like dark green line at the bottom. You can see how the FTEs have fluctuated over the years, to once all of the medical facilities closed in 2011, we were down to 570 employees, and now we're back up to 742. Now, this is all funds from 2008 all the way up to current. So you can see the top line there, that's GF, that stands for general fund, not to be confused with grant funded. But so in 2008, we had 424 positions. We have only increased 11 positions in the general fund since 2008. And we currently have 20 positions in the general fund that are grant funded. We did not always track the grant-funded positions like we do now. In the last probably 5 years, we have gotten much better about tracking and making sure that as the grants go away, the positions go away. But so you can see we've only increased 11 positions, and again, 20 of those are currently grant-funded. And then the line below is the non-general fund, so all of the other funds, those are the allocated positions. And then this breaks out the general fund positions a little bit further, again, by function, as I mentioned. So you can see definitely protection where your board's priority is. That's where we've seen an increase in employees. So 2008 started with 252 employees. Now we're up to 284. All of the other funds, for the most part, have seen there's fewer employees now in those other functions and those other departments than there were in 2008. And just to, that's good. We're good. Okay. And then this is the non-general fund allocated positions. These are by fund. Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to get to the general fund multi-year outlook. We do spend a lot of time like brainstorming and forecasting, and we spent even more time in the last few weeks doing that, and really trying to strategize kind of or anticipate, what might be coming in the future to help us predict what the general fund may look like in the coming years. So this was the information that you saw in previous slides. So we talked about general revenue growth, and those were the average increases. And so we looked at the history, and so we put in our forecast that we are projecting maybe to see the general revenues grow between 4 and 5% in the coming years. You can see the average increases there. We sort of talked about what may be happening. We have I'll get there. And then the departmental revenue growth, we used 5% as an increase for our forecast, looking at these average annual increases here, trying to predict what we may be anticipating. And then over on the expense side, we used an 8% increase for salaries and benefits that we may anticipate seeing in the future. And that is a bit maybe high when you look at the average annual increases here, but we know that all of our bargaining, our MOUs are about to expire this year, and we are also in the midst of an employee compensation study, and we will need to do something to address that employee compensation study, bring positions to market for recruitment and retention purposes, as well as for our signing new MOUs with our bargaining units. And so we put that 8% there. We don't know, 8% was just sort of based on what we're seeing there. And then also thinking for the last time we did long-term MOU amendments, and MOU contracts, we sort of figured it out as far as how to pay for those. And so we just kind of, put a number in there. And then lastly, for services and supplies, we used 8%. Obviously, that's a bit low when you look at the overall annual increase, hoping that maybe some of the last few years' annual increase that we've seen is related to COVID, and so we may not need to spend as much but we'll see, recognizing that might be a little low in the future. Okay, so we came up with 3 different outlooks for the general fund. The first one here is includes these average percentages of annual growth that that I just talked about. It keeps our required transfers out of $1 million to capital. And then our normal $750,000 that we've been transferring out to fire. It does not include any other transfers out. It does not include any other transfers out for fire. So only our standard $750,000, as your board knows. We've done this similar looking slide for fire in the past. It also includes our estimated beginning fund balance of $1.5 million. So your board's budget policy says that we can use 50% of the last 10 years of fund balance to balance the general fund. We looked at the last 10 years at the years before COVID as an example, because COVID, because of the additional funding that we got, made our fund balance, significantly higher. So we didn't feel like it was an accurate reflection. So we put an estimated fund balance in there. We always have a fund balance. Whether it will be $3 million, which allows us to use 1.5 of that to balance, we'll see. But, that's what the numbers would be. The next outlook we put together includes, again, that average annual growth plus TOT growth due to additional lodging. So we meet with CDD regularly to find out updates on developments that we know are in progress. We talk about, the timing, potential room numbers that they might be building, changes to the development or whatever it might be. So we project out what we might be seeing in additional lodging when one facility is maybe going to come on next fiscal year, and then the following, and we look at costs, we do research, we look at comps to determine, what the expense might be or what we might receive in TOT based on cost per room. And then we also, so we put all of that in there based on the timelines that we know so far for the projects that we know about so far. we assumed a 75% occupancy, and then we also netted out the Visitors Bureau contract as well. So that's what this is. It's that regular percentage growth as well as the additional TOT that we might see because of the additional lodging. And then this is the last outlook, and this is the all of those things I mentioned, the average percent growth, plus the TOT growth because of additional lodging, plus the 1% sales tax, if that were to pass, what that revenue would do here to the general fund. Really, this leaves with no shortfall, but really because of your board's priorities of law enforcement, fire, roads, this now gives the opportunity for your board to place that extra money into those other departments. So that's the outlook that we've worked on, and that's, I suppose, it. And so, we're happy to answer any questions that your board has, or I'll turn it over to Tracy.
Okay, very good. We're going to go ahead and take a 15-minute break, just kind of get caught up here a little bit, and then we'll come back with our questions at that time. So thank you. It's 10:40. We'll be back. Okay, ready? All right, everyone. We will resume the Board of Supervisors meeting at this time, and looking to the board for questions now based on the presentation. And Supervisor Kirk, if you could please go first.
All right. Well, I'm going to start off by saying I could probably, when the clarifying questions I have, we could probably do it in 10 minutes, maybe 15, maybe less, depending if I get a short answer. If we go long-winded, we could be here for an hour. So I'm just looking for short answers. You know me, I'm pretty short to the point. I want to start off by saying I feel like this is, you know how we did the priorities, objectives, action items, it took us kind of a few years to get there. We got there, we're fine-tuning it, we're going to finally start getting some quarterly or biannually updates, and it's going to help kind of guide our board and future boards moving forward. For me, I kind of feel like this is the same type of situation. I know I don't know about the rest of the board, but I know I've been asking for this for years. It has come in bits and pieces, and it's been kind of frustrating, but we're here. And moving forward, the point of my questions is obviously to get some clarifying information, but it's also to, I think this is like 50, how many slides is it? 50 slides or so. It's probably going to turn into me maybe like a 70 or 100-page slide presentation in the future, but it's to really, I feel like this is so critically important for us moving forward. And so the suggestions I make are to help me clarify some information, but then also the community. And really, this is going to be a huge guiding tool for me moving forward and future boards, I think. So that's where the questions and the comments are coming from. So thank you in advance for understanding that. The first thing I want to ask a question on is on slide 8. It is the total PERS unfunded liability, all tiers. And you're going to have to wait because sometimes I have to read my own notes before I ask the question. When it comes to, it says total PERS, as you guys all know, the board's interested in the big picture, but then we drill down in the general fund. Can I get a general fund line in here where it specifically calls out what our unfunded liability is for the general fund in this graph? Not now, but in the
future, I'm going to put some disclaimers on this.
Sure.
As long as I can use percentages, there's no way in heck I want to take our PERS detail and try to identify every single person where they are. So rough and dirty won't be right, but rough and dirty, the general fund's about 60%. I would go back and look at the couple years because I can do that.
Okay.
And yes, I could do that for you.
Okay.
You said 60 or 16?
60.
Okay.
60. Okay. So, and I know you'll be moving on eventually, but whoever's behind you.
Donnie will have no problems.
Cool.
He will have all of my Excel schedules. Everything I have been doing every month that I do, I actually tell him where to go, what file it's in, and what's the name of the file.
Okay. And in all honesty and disclosure, this to me is a very important meeting. I don't know about the rest of the board, but I will be going back to this board meeting. I will be watching it. I'm keeping notes because this is a golden opportunity to kind of get what we want out of this presentation. So when I ask for things like this, I really appreciate you guys following up. Okay, so we'll get that one done. And I think, Debbie, you may have clarified the 21.3% earning rate. Could we have like a little comment box what that is for that? Because I think I put what is that? That's what we got on our investment.
That's what PERS earned that year for every single one of their investments. So everybody gets the same rate. There is another schedule that has all of the earnings by PERS. We could also give you that.
Okay, that's pretty incredible that PERS made that type of money because their investments suck, as you know. So if we could just get a little explanation what that is, that way I don't have to ask, every time this is presented, that'd be cool. On the next slide, number 9, it talks about active employees to retired employees ratio. Just so I'm clear, like for 6/30/2022, that 0.43, is it 0.43 employees to fund one employee? Could you just explain?
One retirement employee, yeah.
One retirement employee. So it takes basically 2 employees to fund one
Greater
employee.
than 2 employees to fund 1 employee.
And I just want to clarify for the public, because I know I want to go after CalPERS, but this is part of the reasons why we can't change our retirement formula as far as dropping PERS is because we are dependent on these tier 3 people coming in and paying for our tier 2, tier 1 people going out.
Correct.
It's self-perpetual. Okay. So,
Or else your fixed costs will go through the ceiling.
right. Okay. And I just feel like I know that, but other board members, especially who might come on, may not. It would be great to have maybe a little explanation underneath the slide, the importance of that information. I'm having it's in this slide, but I'm having challenges. I get that the hospital is included in some of these numbers, but I almost want to, I kind of want to clean up the presentation to where I don't want any information on the hospital. I'm not sure if on this slide number 9, under 6/30/11, those counts, 581, average age, I don't know if that includes the hospital, but I just feel like it skews a lot of the information. So I guess does this include the hospital?
Probably at 6/30/11.
Okay.
There's probably some, but very few, not the operational hospital itself. I think the only thing that we still probably had open was long-term care.
Okay. So maybe like in 2012, is all that gone?
I could do that for you if you would like.
Well, it's not, I guess just moving forward, like it would be, I don't know if the rest of the board, they'll have to agree to it, but I just feel like anything hospital related, it just needs to be not in the data because it skews some things.
Yeah,
I think we were paying for long-term care
I was just
up
going to
until
say, you are going to pay for those
2016 or
employees
something.
until they pass away. So
Oh,
they are still
that's-
part of the cost of our liability
Okay.
moving forward. And when you see not in the top part, but when you get to the bottom and you start talking about the count,
Okay.
you talk about our liability, that
makes
is
more
going to
sense.
include all of those hospital employees and anyone else who's left over the years.
Okay.
So that's why it's important that they also be, I think, in there, just to give that some context.
I'll throw in for PERS, I think it's relevant, but I do agree on the total employee counts where we're looking at staffing. That's not what the public is
Right.
asking. They're asking about general county government, not, that is such a stat that skews it. So I think at least for me, I agree. I think it depends on the data we're
Okay.
asking for.
So for this, it makes sense. That's why I'm asking. That's why we're having a conversation. So
Do you want to do
it-
012 or not?
it might just be good to have a side note somewhere, hospital numbers included because of the PERS fixed costs that's associated with those employees. I know I'm getting into the details, but I think it matters. Number 10, let me see. PERS fixed payment history. Again, is there any way, rough and dirty, Debbie, to maybe have just another line with there as far as what's general fund?
And that one's actually accurate. Yes, I could do
Okay,
that.
Cool. So we'll add another line there for general fund. Number 11, let me see. Oh, no, I'll say that for comments. Okay, that one's good. Oh, no, same thing. What is the general fund fixed? So if we could, same thing, add a line for general fund. Let me see, number 12. Okay, I put here, what percentage and amount is general fund correlated with number of employees? So liability insurance, is there any way, is the liability insurance, is that more for, I'm thinking this is more for buildings. It has not, is there any correlation with general fund?
Yes, so it's allocated out based on each department, their budget, number of employees, and their claims. So the more claims you have, then the higher your allocation would be. So yes, general, it is broken up by fund and by department, so we can
Okay.
get that in there.
So we
if you
could
want.
put a general,
Yep.
okay. And then we were talking about, the comment was made, buildings were added. I know obviously we added some homeless, we purchased 5 homes in the center. Is the CARE funding in that, is that funding covering any of this liability insurance?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And remember, we also added 2 CRCs, which did experience significant damage during the last storm, which is why you see in that 22, 23, why you see that spike.
22, 23, okay.
Yeah.
On some of the other graphs, we put boxes as far as like, this was a rim fire, it might be worth it just to put resiliency center,
Other
damage.
buildings too.
Just so people, a year or two now, when they look back, they'll understand what that was. Okay, let me go to, we're good on those slides. All right, I'm jumping to slide 24. And my comments here were, I think putting, like, it's interesting to see the Donnell fire, the rim fire, the construction tree mortality, especially the recession. The recession's very telling, but I'm not sure if we really need this information, because like if you look at the rim fire, we're still going up in sales tax. If you look at Donnell fire was what, 2018? It wasn't until 1920 that we had a dive. So I'm just not sure if the general, if this is a correct correlation. It's cool for a timeline, but I kind of feel like this is saying due to the Donnell fire, this is what happened to sales tax, but I'm not sure if it correlates properly. So I was just curious if you guys had maybe an explanation. Was that more for a timeline, or are we saying we think that these impacted sales tax? Because I would think actually that like numbers from the Visitors Bureau would maybe be a little bit more telling. I don't know.
Well, yes and no. What the Visitors Bureau gives us doesn't always correlate to what we actually see and we receive. That's part of the problem there. But if you look at the next page where you actually see the numbers in 2013. So rimfire started fiscal year 14. So it started August 2013, fiscal year starts July. You will see a decrease there. We went in 13 from 61% increase to a 3% increase. So it actually did decrease that year. They shut the forest down. People couldn't go down in the fall. There was no hunting. A lot of the fishing went away. So you went from a 61% increase to a 3. So these are just notations as to reasons we think you may have seen a change, whether it be positive or negative. It's up to your board. If you don't want those notations, we can take them out, but they were just to give you some context.
I mean, I'm not saying no to them, but that number makes sense. So as long as the numbers make sense for maybe the explanation, which it sounds like it is, then I just needed to read those numbers more thoroughly and associate them with those boxes. So if you guys put time and thought and energy and you think that's correct, then we'll leave them.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's see here. And the same thing with the occupancy tax history, 26. I'll leave the boxes alone, but one thing that I'm not sure we're accounting for properly with our projection is there's a leveling off in 24, 25. Is that leveling off taking into account the new lodging that's coming online? Because when you go back to the box like development, the 120 quarter, there's definitely a good sized bump. So are we projecting that properly?
Well, remember we told you that when the revenue team met, which again I'll repeat, that auditor, treasurer, tax collector, our office, we have an assessor. Thank you. What did I say? Did I forget them all together? Sorry, Kanan. I did not mean to do that. Anyways, what we are concerned about is the impact of Chicken Ranch. We only increased TOT by $100,000. I don't remember what the percentage of that is. Okay. That's because we expect that the 200 rooms at Chicken Ranch at their room rate is going to affect those who pay TOT. that's why you're seeing some of that leveling out. There's a slight increase that's been projected, but not a lot. We're hoping it doesn't decrease, and so we
Okay.
did bump it a tiny bit.
Okay. So in the future, we'll look back and we'll notate on here when the 120 things came online, okay.
And the
Projection.
120, you remember, we did tell you in the projections going forward, we do have 120 in there for those future years.
Okay. So this is including 120
Not for,
for the projection.
not on that one. It is in the later for the projection.
Multi-year outlooks.
Yes.
Okay. But why not include it here, I guess?
We did not do it for 25. I just told you, we only did 100,000. We did not do it. So for 26, 27, 27, 28 is when we put those projections in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry, it was not as clear.
Slide 30, my question was, is ARP factored in here? So with these general growth, revenue growth, is ARP part of these numbers? No? Okay.
No, we put ARP in its own fund, so it's not part of the general fund.
Cool. I just
Now, the benefit
didn't know if it was
that's,
inflating this.
the benefit is for the revenues, it's not in there at all, no.
Okay, cool.
It was in the general fund.
Okay,
Just as a note, Supervisor Kirk, remember before we got ARP, we got, I think it was a CARES Act from the, from COVID, that is in the general fund.
okay.
You took it out of the general revenues? But it's in the budget.
Yeah, it's in
Yes.
the budget, it's not on there.
Yeah.
It's never miscellaneous.
We'll look and see.
Yeah, anyway, sorry, it's in overall, you're probably going to see it more in departmental, I'm not sure, but it's not in general revenues, but the CARES Act, that first allocation that we got when COVID first hit, is going to be reflected in the general fund. And we'll go in there and define where exactly that is.
So is ARP in anything in here that needs to be called out?
Did you put it in the other governmentals, other funds, like DSS? No? Okay.
No, it's not.
I just want to make sure it's not inflating something and I'm.
It's not
reading
in the
numbers
general
wrong.
fund at all.
Okay, okay. Slide 33, protection. I sent an email to some folks. I don't know if the rest of the board feels this way, but I have a real problem with how we define protection. I'm not sure if the board needs to more clearly define it, but I define protection as you call 911, law enforcement, sheriff, police, and not even fire in a different category. So we got that data, we put it on a chart, but it's not reflected in this presentation. Can we specifically call out protection as sheriff and then have another line specifically for fire?
Yes, these, as we noted, these are the state controller. The way we submit our reports to the state every year, that's what this is. So if you want to vary from how we'll still report that way, but if you want a report for you differently, we can do that if that's what the whole board wants to do.
I would
It's up
like
you.
to vary from the state because when we make for instance, we made investment in the sheriff, and you'll see throughout the presentation, you'll see when we get there, but we need to clearly call out that investment so we're not mixing it with some of the other departments. So I would like to put another line in here, sheriff, and then the rest of it could be you could even do sheriff, you could do protection with the sheriff, and then you could do protection without the sheriff. But I definitely want that. I like to see that trend called out. So if you guys are cool with that, I'd like to have
And when
that.
you say sheriff, you mean all of his cost centers too, right? So dispatch,
Yeah.
jail,
Anything
patrol.
related to calling 911, and then sheriff's department.
Yeah, because I'm curious, are you talking, so you're saying exclude like probation, PD, DA?
Just from that one line, the rest of protection can go into that line.
Okay.
But when we made the investments recently for deputies, that didn't include. There was a bump for probation, there was a bump for DA, but it wasn't at the same level. So
So
it's
would
important
we
to track
include
that.
jail too?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I would throw out that if we're breaking it out by kind of the functional area within law enforcement, I think that's useful on a chart like this, where I think protection, you're right, is too ambiguous, but I wouldn't go that specific because we're trying to still group these a little bit. I would use law enforcement and define what that means, which I think includes everything mentioned there, but also probation, district attorney. To me, those somewhat go hand in hand in some ways.
So then maybe
obviously.
let's leave this, but then just make a new graph that just specifically calls out those in law enforcement, sheriff, public defender, DA, we could, I just want to get a little bit more granular because it's one of our highest cost factors in some
Yeah,
of the
your
biggest
board had
investments.
adopted a public safety wheel, and I think that's what Supervisor Brandon is referring to, which was the sheriff, probation, district attorney, animal control, and public defender. That was the wheel that your board had adopted when we talked throughout the last couple of years.
Okay.
So we could stick with that so that it's those core components, or we can break it out however you want, just as long as we know it's what everyone.
So having protection as a whole is good as a category, but I agree with Supervisor Kirk that, when we make substantial investments in a particular area, it would be nice to paint that picture so that we, can call that out and see it better. Now, the same thing could happen in the future, depending where we go with fire. If we make additional big investments in fire, would like to see that as well, so that it just helps, to be able to grasp it. Okay, sorry, Supervisor Kirk, go ahead.
No, you're good. Thank you. Let's see here. I'm going to scratch that note. This is just a preference. I'll make it quick. On slide 35, so many colors, cool.
Yeah.
But what I hate is that the roads is buried in green. Green's like the color that you can't see. And if you look at it, you can see how much money we've dumped into roads since 2019, 20. So I would like to make that yellow so it stands out, and make COVID funding, the social services one, green, because it's kind of up there on its own. I think it's important for that to be a little bit more visible. Sorry, it's just my preference. On slide 36, there is a little chart right there, the multi-year average growth. I see this, but I don't see a chart for salaries like you did with the general.
There is one. It's later in the report. These are all revenues.
What's that?
Not for the non-general fund departments?
Oh, right. So
So
part
the
of the follow-up is also to ask your board if you want a similar presentation, but for non-general fund departments.
Like a full presentation like this?
Similar to that, yes, so.
I'm not there yet, but it would just be nice to
Okay.
just have a little chart like you did with the general fund, those salaries, just so I could see what's our growth and what are we paying out in salaries with the revenue versus the
That's a good
revenue.
idea.
Does that make sense? Cool.
That's a good
Okay.
idea, yeah.
All right. Slide 38, this is kind of to the point that I was talking about, and sounds like most supervisors agree. On slide 38, when we're talking about general fund salaries, I would like, this is, where we made some big investments with law enforcement. It would be nice to have that called out separately, because the 3-year average increase at 10.29 is very large. I don't know what percentage of that is driven by the law enforcement investments, or fire. Is fire included in this?
No.
No,
No.
it's just general fund.
Okay. So for me, it'd be great to know over basically the same data, but pull law enforcement from that. I mean, you could leave it with law enforcement, you could pull it out, but I need to know how much that bumped because of law enforcement investment, if possible. Because I bet if you pulled them out, we'd probably be like a 3-year average. We'd probably be more like a 4 or 5 or 6%, is my guess.
Supervisor Kirk, if it helps, I had the same question I asked ahead of time. I was provided with, in 2020, amongst all the law enforcement entities, the total cost was for salary and benefits 16 million. 2024, 21 million. So of the roughly $8 million increase that we see here, depending on kind of where you start with that, it's a little more. I think it was about 60% of that was specific to law enforcement.
So 60% of that 10.29 would be law enforcement.
Yeah.
So back to it'd probably be around 4 or 5%. So
Depending on what year.
We can
Right.
break it up.
Okay, so if we could get that, that'd be great.
And would you like the same for 39 as well? Because that's benefits as well.
Probably, yeah.
One
Let me
is just
see. Yeah,
salaries, one is-
benefits. Yeah.
okay.
Because to be honest with you, when I look at this, and I am not a math whiz. I went to school. I wanted to be an attorney and fight crime and do all that. But when, like, just simple math, when I look at like revenue growth, 3.09, 5.21, 6.75, and then I look at salaries, which is every single percentage is above that, 3.43, 7.42, 10.29. The simple math person will say, how can you spend more on salaries than you have coming in? And that's part of why we are where we are, but I want to be able to explain to folks the law enforcement investment, because it's bumping that, and that needs to be called out.
We're going to have to check that.
On slide 41, I don't know if anybody can answer this, but it's a huge, like the 3-year average annual increase for supplies, services and supplies. I get supplies, I get inflation. Really briefly, can you define more like what the services section is? Because there's such a huge increase from the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, yes, thank you. It is all your contracts as well, so a lot of our departments contract out for various services. Yes. Everything that's operating, yeah. And there are, I would say the majority of your mandated costs that our departments are charged, again, from those internal service funds, a majority of those are in the services and supplies line. So it's a large, I was sort of saying that, like, this is the part that sort of departments have some discretion over. It's like training and vehicles, and, you know, I'm not going to buy my vehicle this year because I can't afford it, whatever. But it's actually, as I was thinking more about it, a lot of our mandated costs are in this services and supplies line, which departments do not have discretion over. As our mandated costs increase, say our liability that you just saw, you know, a handful of slides ago, as that increases, that reduces the department's ability to kind of have their training and their other contracts and their, you know, just office supplies, which isn't, you know, a large amount of money, but.
So back to the idea of adding some more size to this presentation. I feel like because the numbers, 3.37, 13 I feel like those justify some more understanding of why those are increasing at such a high rate. I don't know if, like, are things, like if our contracts can be reviewed, would like the Resiliency Center be included in this, the CRC?
The Resiliency Center is a department in the general fund. So yeah, any services and supplies that they have would be incorporated in there. Yeah.
Keep in mind, this is an area, and it's over that period of time, at least in the beginning part, when the CARES Act did come in. A lot of that was spent on contracts and widgets and vehicles and capital. If that wasn't any of that spent in the general fund, it would have driven up that number artificially as well, too, because we had that influx of cash that we don't normally get. But we can break it up more, but it is everything that someone operates besides salaries and benefits. So, you know, your utilities, office expense, contracts, all of that is in that number.
I think if I knew now what this part of the presentation would be, I would have maybe asked weeks or months ago, hey, since it's such a high, to me, it's such a high number, I need a little bit more explanation as to what all this is and what's going on. So I don't want to send you down a rabbit hole, but that's a lot of money. So if there's some good reasoning behind it, great. But so say like we did this in 6 months or a year, and that number is still there or going up, I just would need more information. And what are we doing to mitigate it, if at all possible? Okay, got a few more. Let's see here. We're almost to the end, guys. Okay, on the slide 44, where it says total allocated positions, does this include grant-funded positions? It does? Okay. I think it would be, you know how we are about grant-funded positions. They skew some things. It would be great to have a number, how many of these are, or just another chart, how many of these are grant-funded. And I know you guys only started going back about 5 or 6 years ago, so even if there's just a starting point in 2019 or 2020, it'd be great to have a little chart or a little line to show what is grant-funded. And then it's a cool big picture to show total allocated positions. But if somebody goes online and doesn't listen to our board meeting, they're going to think that, like, oh, we've done a great job. We were 965 and now we're only 72, but this it doesn't call out the hospital. We all know it is.
It does in future slides.
It does in the future
That's
slide.
why we did this one.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah.
La la la. I got this a couple days ago. Okay, thank you for doing that. On slide 46, it talks about, Liz, you made a comment about there's only been 11 increase. I was trying to understand what you were saying.
Yeah, so in 2008, the general fund had 424 positions.
Okay.
In 2024, the general fund has 435 positions.
But wasn't that because we
That's
had
an
hospital?
increase. No, so that's the general fund. The hospital wasn't in the general fund. So that's an increase overall in the general fund of 11 positions since 2008.
So,
And as we know now, 20 positions in the general fund currently are grant funded. We don't
Okay.
know what the data was in 2008. Unfortunately, we weren't really tracking the grant funded positions in 2008.
so what was cut from 20, what was the big reduction? Because the average I go back to 2000, like in 2010, general fund total, non-grant funded was 378, 357, 335, 342. But since 2012, we've added 99. So where was what was that big reduction that brought us down to 236?
If you look on the next slide, it does general fund positions by category. So you'll see where your general government went down by 2021
What slide?
on
Just the
slide
next
47. So it shows you where the increases went. Again, now we can break this down to be the detail that you specified earlier about public safety as opposed to public protection as identified by the state controller. But that you can see we went from 252 to 284 in what is labeled as public protection. That's going to be your not only your sheriff and your jail and your juvenile hall, but also CDD is in here. Your board has added positions to that in the past, so we can break it down more.
Back to breaking it down, because, okay, cool. That was my note for that slide, so thank you for answering that. Okay, on slide 50, with the general revenue growth and then the growth versus the expenses, I know you guys kind of gave a forecast 4 to 5%, and then we use 8% forecast. Why are we giving the 8% forecast because of what's already been bargained in the step increases, and that's what we're expecting to expend? Do we have an 8% increase issue coming, or are we expecting that once we go into? I guess is that in the works going to happen, or is that because we're expecting that based on?
Right. Remember, all of your bargaining units are up this year.
Okay.
And we will be negotiating something. And so that's why we use the 8%, was knowing that we're going to have to do something over these. The last time we did it over a 4-year period. So that's why we carried it out through multiple years even, was for that reason.
Okay. To me, this is really, really important, though, because why would we put ourselves in a situation to say that we're going to potentially have an 8% increase, but we know we only have 4 or 5% coming in? Why wouldn't we position ourselves and say we have 4 or 5% coming in, and we're going to position ourselves for 4 or 5 going out?
Because we have minimum wage going up, which you will have to increase. We have people making minimum wage now.
Okay.
The reality is when we start bargaining, you're going to be out of your MOUs, and there will be pressure to do something. And so, of course, it's up to your board what you want to do. I want to point you back to, let me find the slide where we do not revenues, but expenses. So if you go back to slide 38, I just want to point this out, and this is what's up right now. When we did the last compensation study, it was implemented over a 4-year period, 2017 through 2020. You see that big increase in 2017 was where some of the heaviest equity adjustments were made. But what I'm calling this out to, there was no pot of money for us to implement that compensation study. The board did what they felt was right in bringing people to market, but they also made the message out to their employees that means we were going to have to live within our means. So you will see at times where our number of FTEs reduced. And we've been having these conversations with employees and department heads, and in order to do fair compensation, it may require reducing your workforce in order to do that for those who are still here. I call that out because if you look at 17 through 20, you're not seeing that 8% increase, but we did not only equity adjustments, but we did COLA. So if you were not at market, you still got a COLA. I'm thinking it was 3%, 2%, something like that. I think it was a 3% COLA every year, and then those who were not at market, the board at that time said The goal is over 4 years to bring everyone within 10% of market. So we then cut that into a 4-year time frame, and then we did COLAs in along with that. The goal was that we would keep people from falling behind. I just call this out because you can see you did not see those 8 and 9% in there because we also had to make adjustments to our workforce and to our spending in order to accomplish that.
Thanks again for bringing it back to the slide because I didn't catch that 10 and 11. That would need to be called out again as far as law enforcement, right? Because that was a big part of that was the investments we made. But I hear what you're saying, but the 5-year annual average increase was still 7.42% when the
Right, but that's 7 years. I mean, it takes
over
you.
7 years.
It does give you, I guess, a couple of those.
But when you look at the general revenue growth, I guess we're barely keeping up with it. The 5-year average, it doesn't give a 7-year average. It just gives a 5-year average of 7.18.
Yeah. I absolutely hear what you're saying. It's just the reality of every single bargaining is the board is not only offered to employees when they're in intense bargaining, only or not more than. So if you have a 5% increase in revenues, we'll give 2%, right? I mean, that would make sense logically, mathematically. That has not been the history of what we've seen when we go into bargaining, especially when it comes to law enforcement.
I think what I'm trying to say is I want to change the history of how we do business.
I hear you.
We need this information so that when we go into bargaining, we're not bargaining for something we don't have to give.
Just to say you did,
I've never had a presentation like this before.
but the information was provided.
I will always bat for law enforcement investments, but that's why this is a good thing moving forward.
And you guys can definitely, if what you're saying is you want us to adjust these numbers, that's why we're here. We'll adjust them and we'll bring them back to you with whatever it is you're seeing. We can do whatever scenario you want. If you're saying I'm seeing revenues of 4 to 5% and we don't want wages to go over 2, then that's what we're going to put in there.
I think for me, what would be good is to say, what's our general revenue growth coming in? What can we afford? And what do our employees potentially deserve based on their market value? That way we can see the full picture.
And then remember, in the middle of this, you have employees who are going through their steps.
Right,
They get 5% per year.
Which
right?
should be included in the forecast,
Yeah,
right?
the longevity, it's in there, but that part of that 8% is as people are working through those steps too.
Supervisor Kirk, I have a question that might, because I had the same thing. If our costs are going up and the percentage is higher compared to the revenues of what we're taking in, but the costs on here are like our budget projections, they're not the actuals, and we have a very high vacancy rate. So is that potentially a reason? I mean, if we have a 15 to 20% vacancy rate, then 15 to 20%, assuming, again, quick and dirty math, of the projected costs on here aren't real costs. They're money that is recouped at the end of the year.
Correct. So it is projections, as you hear Debbie and I saying. Remember, budget is projections, it's not actual. So yeah, you'll have many factors. The same thing with your services and supplies. We don't always spend all of the contract. We don't always buy the widgets and all that kind of stuff. Utilities aren't always as high as what we estimate, because of course we estimate kind of high. So that's where that fund balance comes in, is yes, we always have something left over.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that. So we did sort of account for that when we added in an estimated projected fund balance in here of the 1.5 million. Again, anticipating that was 50% of what we think our actual fund balance will be. And as you said, Supervisor, fund balance is in large part because of salary, because of vacancies and salary and benefits that we don't end up spending and other things. So it's sort of accounted in here when we look at the shortfall, not necessarily the percentages here, but we did kind of.
Supervisor, thank you. Let me ask that.
Yep. I think I'm wrapping up. Let me see here. Slide 51, there's a line, it's about 5 or 6 down, it talks about transfers out. What is?
Yep. So those are, we have maintenance of efforts for our roads department. The county's required to transfer out $775,000 to roads, so it's that. We transfer out, I think I mentioned when I was talking about our general revenues, we get about, like $3 million or so that comes into the general revenues that we are required to transfer right out to our Health and Human Services Agency departments. So it's that. And then it's $1 million for capital and $750,000 for fire, as your board has been committed to over the many years.
Is that already called out somewhere in the presentation? Did I miss it?
What?
The transfers out?
No, it's just
Okay.
listed in here.
It might be worth it just to have a little explanation at the bottom of this,
Yeah.
like what transfers out
Yeah.
is, just so.
And I will just say the reason why in 24-25 the transfer out is about $2 million higher is because, or I'm sorry, $3 million higher is because of our encampment resolution funds that we received, for our homeless services. Those went into the general fund and then they're transferred out to capital. So that's,
Okay.
but it won't be ongoing into the future.
And outlook, number 2, none of this takes into account, or number 2 with lodging, it doesn't take into account Chicken Ranch coming on board and what we think those impacts will be, or does it?
It does.
It does, okay. And let me see. I think that is it for my questions, and thank you guys for bearing with me.
All right, Supervisor Brandon, you want to go next?
Happy to. Thank you. And thanks to Supervisor Kirk, too. I had a lot of similar questions on that. I wanted to say thank you. This is a ton of work to pull together. I definitely agree with the sentiments that since joining the board, this is something I've been interested in, from the pension and liability debts to being able to distill this into something that the public is able to understand a little better. And then as a new supervisor initially, something that is easier for us to understand and make decisions. I think over the years we do get very good, well done, but bits and pieces, year-to-year analyses or specific tactical analyses on something we're considering. But we have lacked something like this, which is an overall view of, let's say, over the last 10 years, these are the changes to kind of be aware of. So I like that this is here. I think it needs to continue. I wanted to recognize that though this has been a priority, for sure, we've had staff losses that have made this challenging within the administrative department, right? We've had people who have been more or less our finance-focused person that have left. And so we were talking before, we've got a lot of issues with retaining knowledge within the county government. We've got a lot of people that are retiring and leaving. We are seeing shorter terms of people working for us. And where we train somebody to take a position and they are the one person and that person leaves, it puts us into a really difficult spot. So I think that needs to be recognized that has been one of the challenges we're dealing with. What I'd like to see from this is that I think this needs to be ongoing. This is something that we should be adding to year over year, presenting. It should be annual to the board or to the finance committee, and giving us additional updates and continuing to iterate and improve on it. It needs to be narrative. So this is very good in terms of data. But I think for some of these things, and I'll talk a little more about a recommendation in a minute, I'd really like to see it explained in terms of, I just moved to the county, have no idea about it, but as a competent adult, can you explain why these things make sense into kind of, how did we get here today? What decisions affected that? Some of these are very much out of our control. We get the insurance bill of whatever it is. Other ones, like a Prop 13 or an SB1 or a lodging entity that's large opening up, provides an inflection point that kind of says that this is why that happened. And I think we've got a lot of good examples of it. And the last bit is I think it needs to be distilled. There's a lot of a lot of info here. There are some key things that I think are what are on people's minds that aren't necessarily included. But there are a lot of things here that, while relevant to a board presentation, and I think that's what, of course, this is designed for, to the public is not necessarily something that needs to be called out in as much detail. It'd be better to kind of focus more attention on to diving into some of the ones that are the more common questions or misunderstandings. Just reminding, too, that property tax is the main bit, and we get, at best, 1% of the value of 6% of the land, of which only 26% goes to the county, and only 24% of our budget is actually at any level discretionary, and a very small fraction of that is actually movable around based on, we got to have lawyers, right? And we've got to pay utility bills and things that you can't really avoid. So we've got some really serious structural financial challenges that I think this lays out a few of them. Again, I think we need to have a narrative on why does it suck, right? I mean, that's the question. I mean, people look at it and they say, oh, obviously you're mishandling money. You don't know how to spend it. You don't know how to plan. And we've seen over, in particularly the last 3 years, a lot of the investments being in public safety, but also prepayment on our retirement benefits, which has not happened a ton, right? We now got a new account for that, putting more money away into reserves to help, rebuild some of that, and generally a very modest growth in anything that is actually under our control. And for what purposes? Generally to bring grant money in or to perform some form of economic development. And I just think it needs to be recognized, but we have to explain it in a way people understand. So I did have a question on financial reserves. Wanted to ask if you can reiterate our policy on reserves for the budget, as well as comparing either 2020, 2021. Those are the most important years to me, of course, because 21, I joined the board. But whatever year you'd like to compare to now, we've made some investments. Where were we at? Where are we now? How far are we from the goal of where we should be for a prudent reserve?
Yeah, so the board's policy is that reserves should be funded at 7% of all governmental funds, excluding capital and likely excluding grant funds as well, or grant-funded departments, again, like the MSA. This year in the recommended budget, that would be $200,077,697 for
7%
governmental
of that?
funds. Yeah, I mean, governmental, not general fund. Yeah, no. So that's the total budget. So 7% of that would be $14,005,439.
Okay.
And currently,
And can we start with where we were at, maybe in 2020 or 21?
yes,
Because I know it might be
absolutely.
a little short of that
So in
number.
2021, we were at, so just to clarify, the 14 million is what we should be to get us to 7%.
Right.
Yep. In 2021, our reserves were funded at 2.8 million. And I did not pull what our budget was at the time and what percentage that would be. So I could do that. But currently, because of the action that your board took to move reserves into fire, our reserves were funded at 5 million. They're now funded at 4,525,219, which is 2.3%. If you were to look at the overall operating budget of the governmental funds.
Right. And
So-
we have a policy, is it 500,000 per
That's
year?
right. That's right.
To my knowledge, we've put about $1 million a year aside into reserves. Right?
Yeah, so in 22, so in 21, we were at 2.8 million. In 22, we actually bumped up to 4 million.
Yeah.
In 23, we bumped up to 5, and then obviously to
Little
finish
for
out
5.
24, we stayed at 5.
So I think it'd be really helpful to have an additional slide. I think reserves is one of those things. Specifically, 3 things that would be great on an area chart would be having fund balance, reserves, and contingencies. Each of those tells a little bit of a different story, but over a 10-year frame, I think would show too what we inherited as far as our safety net or the vacancy rates. We talked a little bit about the fund balance. I think that's a really important point of why we budget oftentimes a lot more than what the costs are growing, but 15% of all of these positions are not filled or paid at any given time, at least. And that's been one of the cost drivers too. I know it was mentioned, and thank you for providing this, that by Supervisor Kirk within the salaries and benefits specifically, I do think we need to, again, have the kind of qualification on some of those. For the last 3 years, it looks like, well, boy, everybody's getting paid a ton more, 10% a year. And folks look at it and say, well, I didn't get 10% during this inflation period. Well, the reason was after, again, to my understanding of this, some of those increases within the county, there was a long period where we saw very limited amounts coming in, and public safety pay had dropped to the lowest within the entire region. Especially those 37 counties, those pension benefits are crazy that they offer within that. And what we were doing were pay increases specifically within public safety to bring them back up to competitive, because that was a department that was getting to the point that it was almost unable to provide what we would consider, I think, a minimum level of service, and pulling back some very important but less core missions into it. Now I'm very happy to see that with our former sheriff and our current sheriff, I believe we're fully staffed up pretty much on patrol. We've seen the impacts of those investments. But pulling that out of there with the $8 million, about $5 million, 62.5%, went into public safety. So that's, again, one of those inflection points that somehow we got to be able to note that in there. To anybody looking at this, if you're wanting to see competitive deputy pay, that means salary increases. You can't simultaneously be against pay and benefits for public employees and also not want to see public safety get these increases and not expect, as one of the largest cost centers, this to drive some of the budget challenges that we're having. I wanted to highlight on slide 47. I think that's one of the most important ones here.
So just to clarify, are we in questions or comments? Because
I thought we were doing questions and comments. But... Oh, okay. Well, then I will hold the rest of this because they're mostly comments. But thank you.
Apologies for the interruption. I just was wondering. It's nice to hear most of my questions were answered already, so I just wasn't sure what else was on there.
Okay, so are you done with questions then, Supervisor? Okay. Supervisor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. All right, so we talked about TOT. I'll take that off the list. All right, so the problem here is that it's much easier to predict our expenses years in advance than it is to predict our revenues. It seems, and what I'm taking from this is we're really only making an economic outlook prediction a fiscal year in advance. We're not really looking at. So really, this is more of a snapshot of what the financial situation is right now. So in that vein, I wanted to ask first about, I'll just kind of go in order of how this is laid out. Will the PERS increases continue to rise at the rate that they are right now forever? Will there ever be a point where we'll reach an equilibrium? If you look at, the 2030 forecast, $16 million, is the rate at which we're increasing our fixed payment costs keeping pace with the amount of new employees coming on and those costs through PERS?
According to PERS, it should level out. But reality is, because they're 2 years behind, exactly some of the things that we are talking about, the raises that were given in the last year or so, that's not going to hit the fix for 2 more years. We don't know. I mean, we're definitely it's logically to say that most of the people that were at the TGH and all their facilities age-wise should have been retired by now, so we shouldn't have big jumps in retirement again. But the PERS is determined on the salaries we give our employees, the earnings that PERS does for all of their investments, and the number of employees we have working and retired or claiming and pulling out of their funds. Mm-hmm. So with all of those variables, it's really hard to determine. The logic of how PERS is doing the fixed cost should level out unless some of those variables are materially out of whack.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just, you have a forecast 2030, yes, which it sounds to me like that's very far in the future, but if you actually count the difference between 2024 and 2030, that's only 6 years. So that, and we're already halfway through 2024 or more. That is an incredible figure to me, $16 million in fixed PERS payments.
And just to clarify, these are not our projections. These are PERS projections.
Is it possible that there's ever going to be any relief there? And is every county facing the same kind of thing?
Most jurisdictions are facing the same thing because they don't have some of the attributes, or issues that we do. Again, we went from a larger, 300 plus more employees than what we have today. But most of the entities have somewhere around the same issues that we have. The other issue that we have with PERS is that PERS wants everybody to be 100% funded. They're not going to stop the fixed until you're 100% funded. Is that logical? In most other entities, when you do an actuarial, like when we do an actuarial for our workers' comp, or we do an actuarial for our liability, or you do an actuarial for your other post-employee benefits, most people are comfortable around a confidence rate about 70 to 80%, and that's what you would fund. PERS wants and will have 100% of everybody funded. So that may be something that we could take as groups to the PERS board and maybe not have it so 80% is probably a more logical. If I remember right, for our miscellaneous group, you don't have I think we're 62% funded. Yeah, but the problem is that was the big.
I know, but I'm just saying.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, no, we dropped. But in the safety groups, they are better funded than the miscellaneous group.
Okay. Going on to the slide where you list the rate of change in the number of employees that we have, are the number at the very end of the scale where you have the current number of county employees, are those real FTEs, or is it all positions including vacancies?
It's all positions, including vacancies.
Okay. Is that what we're counting in the past, though?
Allocated positions, yeah.
Allocated positions, okay.
Correct.
Even going back to
Yes.
when the hospital was open, okay.
Correct.
So it's all, okay. I just wanted to make sure it was all rated on the same scale. With respect to payment in lieu of taxes, there was a lot of interest and activity in that for a few years, and that's kind of died down. Have you heard any predictions about that being taken up again?
I mean, we stay, I think it's a gentleman named Jonathan, and he just, Supervisor Brennan just stepped out at NACO that is great with this stuff. I haven't heard, the good thing is it's been funded every year, which we have had years, as you know, that it's been at risk, but it's been funding and it's growing. So like this year, I think you got the email from Debbie, I think it was at $200,000 growth. I haven't heard about them doing any type of reform, or, a new formula or anything like that, but at least it's growing a bit, and they've been funding it for the last several years.
Okay.
SRS still has not been approved.
I was going to ask you
Yes.
about that.
That
So
one-
we got like 900,000
It's in the
or something
farm
last
bill.
year.
We're waiting for them to see if they're going to approve that
So
farm bill.
we're leaving that out because we're
It's
not
not
sure.
general fund.
Goes to roads.
Yeah, that
It's
goes
not
in.
general fund?
No, it's roads. It goes into roads.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so property tax, 26% of that is county. Just as a informational, how do you get property tax to increase?
Okay, property tax
More
increases in a normal world, and in the last 34 years, it's been a normal world, except for I think 3 times. Property tax increases 2% every year as long as the state CPI increases.
Sorry, I don't mean the actual tax itself. I mean, how do you raise the revenue from property tax?
I was going there.
Yeah.
So the only way that you're going to do that is to increase the appraised value of homes. So the only way you're going to do that is to resell the homes, or add additions to the homes at the appraised value that the assessor goes out, increases that. And then remember, whatever that value is, the property tax is based on 1% of that, and we get 26% of that 1%.
Where I was getting
There's
at
also
was,
development, yes. So if you build new homes, new housing developments, but also the commercial will probably drive more than these singular homes that are going in. When they put in, we just heard Sonora Subaru, when they put that in, that's going to be a big cost for them, which will increase the value. So as we see developments going in, the hotels, all of that will drive those property taxes up as well.
yeah, the reason I bring that up is that you often see opposition to development projects in the community. And I would just think people would do well to consider that the more development that's coming in, that they're actually going to be paying property taxes. And if it's new development, they're probably going to be paying higher property taxes than you. So it's a net benefit for the people that have been there for a long time and may not want to see things change, but there's an added benefit there, so.
You did just remind us, though, I was just sitting here thinking, and I don't have any idea how we could even try to estimate that, is we did not increase, the property taxes you're seeing is based right now on the average roll increase that the assessor provides to the auditor. I don't have anything in property tax increases for development, and that's something, actually, when we go back to the team, we'll see if we have any way of estimating what people are building and the value of that, because all of those new ones going in would make a difference at some level. Still takes a lot, that 1% and then 26% of that and all that, but that's it. Thank you, because I was just saying we did not put that in there.
One thing I'm kind of looking for, because this really shouldn't come as much as a surprise to anybody here or anybody that comes to board meetings and follows this, the financial situations. It's pretty simple when you get down to it. We're talking about a few different revenue streams and a few very large expenditures, and there's really not a whole lot else, maybe a little bit at the margins. But one thing I would kind of be looking for, is there a way you can develop this, a chart that takes all of this information, show the rate of increase for total revenues on top of rate of increase for total expenses? Because I think that just kind of boils it down for people that only want to understand the very high level element of it. Now that all of that information is here right now, but it takes a little bit of work to get down to that and a little bit of understanding. So that'd be something I'd be kind of looking for. Okay. Yeah. I'll end it there. Thank you.
Okay, well, my fellow board members made it easier. A lot of good questions. I did have a couple here. So let me get to the... On slide 13. So my question was, how much is the law and justice bond payment per year? I heard somewhere around $1 million. Is that correct? Or?
I don't have it broken out. I think it's around 1.3 is what it had been, but we will see that coming down when the IT portion goes away. I think it goes to 1.1.
2028 or something.
Yeah,
that.
yeah, but it's been around, like, I'm thinking 1369 or something like that.
Okay.
And then I think it drops down more like around, here we go, yeah.
There you go.
So, so you see where it drops down to about 1.1 in 2028, but right now it is, I think it's close to about like 1.36, so it's almost 1.4 million.
Okay. Well, lessons learned there. I mean, it, got a beautiful facility, the jail in particular, but perhaps a bit overbuilt, and so now we're paying that price for over 30 years. So it's pretty substantial. Lessons learned for the future, right? Slide 41. Just a general question. Utilities was included in this group. We've had some discussions, and we're still interested in moving forward, perhaps like on a CCA. And I'm just wondering, potentially, what impact would we see? Somewhat of a reduction.
I don't remember, this is at the TPPA rates because we don't buy power, it's through public power. I don't foresee you'll see a decrease in utilities as a result of that. Very unlikely CCA is going, but we'll see. We'll know when we hit that feasibility study. But I doubt that there'll be less than what we pay through the Public Powers Authority. We have a really good rate
Right, yeah, no, and I understand that. So, I mean, could be really good benefits for,
We could, yeah.
homeowners and businesses and what have
Absolutely.
you, but not so much for the county based on the TPA.
And we'll see when we get that feasibility study, look at rates, we'll know more.
Sure, okay. Slide 52. Just in general, there was a comment made, I think Tracy, you said it regarding Chicken Ranch and the potential for its draw away from existing properties, which could end up being, because they're not doing TOT
Or sales tax.
at Chicken
yeah.
Ranch. So, that's an unknown.
It is.
I would, I still think that the Chicken Ranch will be brand-new resort facility with all kinds of, attractive, things for people. And it'll probably be a destination on its own, certainly, for many people. But a lot of people that are coming up to Tuolumne County for other purposes, they're going to drive right by that because they're headed up the 108 or 120 corridor and doing other things. So, just in suggestion that after the first year, maybe, work with the Lodging Association and visit Tuolumne County and try and see their take on, the impact.
Yeah.
And then do it again another 6 months later so that you've covered all the seasons of a year. But a way to look at that a little bit better than this shotgun,
For
we
sure.
just don't know
Yeah, and by then
what's
we'll
going to
have,
happen.
by then our businesses that are filing the TOT tax returns, we will have those, and the treasurer can give us a better idea of impacts, if any. Like I said, we did build in a small increase, just not as large as what we might have done otherwise.
Okay, good. And then in general, the whole Subaru, did we factor in our projections some increase in sales tax or property tax with that property coming online? I mean, it's down the road still, but
We did not.
probably
no.
too far down the road to.
But
to
I'm going to
look
write
at.
that in because that's another good point. A lot of these, even with the lodging, they'll tell us dates, but we already know there were two major who thought they'd be open already, right? So you're still kind of projecting when they might actually open. But
Right.
it's a good point along with the property tax that we didn't do with the new lodging. Subaru, we did not factor that in. And we know we have a sharing, but we'll look at that.
Yeah,
with the
it's a
team.
little ways out, but, once they break ground, a dealership, there's not a whole bunch to them. They can go up remarkably quick as far as the structures and getting in business. That's all the questions that I had for now. I've got some additional comments after, so.
Chair Goldberg, I wasn't sure. I missed one question and then two came up after hearing you guys speak. Could I
Yeah,
ask them real
go
quick?
ahead,
Okay.
Supervisor Kirk.
First one was, historically with bargaining, do we have like a set time when we enter into bargaining? Like, is it January? Is it July? Is it November? Do we have?
We enter into them several months before their contract terminates. They all terminate on different, no, almost all of them are on different dates right now. And I have a Post-it with all of them. I don't have them in front of me. The first one is August of this year.
August, okay.
And then we have January.
And you have,
Between August and January.
and you have to start bargaining X amount of time before it
Well,
expires?
you should start bargaining. You really don't want to operate outside of a current MOU, but,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm just thinking long-term, would it be a possibility to change the way we do bargaining to where we have to wait until we get through budget, till we do projections, and then we enter into bargaining?
Remember, your bargaining units don't necessarily, I mean, I don't want to say they don't care about budget, but they are looking at their MOU and it's coming up. They are expecting to enter into active negotiations before it terminates. So could you say that? You could. Will it happen? I don't know. We may be having to engage anyways.
Okay.
And there's lots of rules that fall in there, and we'll get some training going on that pretty quickly.
The other two, real quick, were, I didn't ask this earlier and I meant to, and I'm assuming they're not, but are there any other governmental funds, enterprise, internal services, are there any other positions that are in this that affect the general plan that need to be called out? As in, are there positions or work that are being impacted, taking from the general fund that aren't maybe being reimbursed or need to be? Like if social services needs work done and it pulls from the general fund services, is that being reimbursed properly? Do we have any
In most
overlap?
cases, I would say it is. Anytime we do a grant or additional services, it impacts the core, Debbie's
Like
office.
I know, like
so-
county council, of course, gets
Yeah,
pulled in.
yeah, but most times we're building in those costs, especially when you go to HHSA,
Right.
because they're not general fund. Anything that comes from the general fund is often being billed to them.
Okay.
But I would say there's always a component that is not funded. Yeah, and then you have the 87, exactly. So while we might not be doing all of our positions, they are getting that through the 87 that they're paying and billing to their cost reports and stuff like that.
Okay. And then my last question was, I went back and I looked at my chart for positions, allocated positions. I don't know if it's 20 or 28. I counted 28 grant-funded positions. But one of the questions I have is when I'm looking at the unfunded liability with PERS, is grant-funded positions part of that liability?
Yes,
It is?
yes. If they were, well, if they're, Debbie and I were just talking about this yesterday as we walked in from our meeting with the business council yesterday. If they're here 5 years or more and they become invested, or they don't cash out, right? Because if they go somewhere else and haven't cashed out, then they're still PERS, they're still eligible. So yes, there is a future cost for those positions that we can't recoup through any type of charging to those grants. We also have something similar when we have claims for, say, liability, like we had in tree mortality. We had a claim, OES is being charged for something that is, 5 or 6 years ago, but the PERS is the biggest one. So yes, if they stay and they're vested, then they're part of that number moving forward.
Do we have any idea how many stay past that 5 year? I guess that's kind of getting into the weeds again, but I'm interested. Like, could we get another graph where it shows here's the grant funded, here's who are part of the unfunded liability, and obviously it's going to be a much smaller
It depends.
amount.
Many times your grant funded staff, when they're really good staff, they end up moving into permanent positions. Is
Right.
most often what we see. We could definitely look at that with the ones we've been tracking and we know, like, oh, that person moved on. But if they don't cash out and say, wait a year and go to another PERS entity, then it will still hit us later at some level.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is when we think grant, we think it's covered, but it's potentially adding
is,
to our
yes.
long term.
We were just talking about this
liability.
yesterday.
So what makes that position liable? Is it their title? Is it because they're an employee? Is it because of the amount of time? Like, how do I'm
it's
sorry,
all-
but how do I get a grant funded position out of a long term liability?
I cannot.
That might go.
To make it a position, the only way you'd be able to do that, and you under the law, you might not be able to do it, is if you contracted out for services rather than did an employee. But if it walks and talks like an employee, it's an employee by law.
So whether it's an OT or an executive,
Yep.
the title doesn't matter.
Right. As long as if they're working, we're giving them what they're going to do. They're working on our county properties or using our stuff. We're overseeing their work, telling them how to do it. Those are all the criteria that make someone an employee.
But we could have employees that could be at one level versus an executive level.
Yes.
Where do we decide where they land on that spectrum?
It's their title, so their class spec, and that determines also which union they go into. Most of your grant funded are OE3 or management even. Remember, we only have exempt employees in our management MOU, so, or executive.
So are most of our grants executive then?
No, not most of them. I would say there are some that are executive, like MSA, OES, those are in your executive. But your HHSA, they could be management or OE3 or health.
Who decides
We were
what's in
kinda
what
getting
categories?
into
Depends on the-
Well,
depends
are
on
we
the
kind
work.
of getting into the weeds a lot? 'Cause
Yeah, but it's
the total
it's-
sum amount you're talking about, it's not.
It's not.
It depends on the type
We're
of
here.
work they're doing,
Okay.
is what really.
So is that decided by the grant? Does the grant?
Yes, the
give
grant
the
will tell you
title?
that, exactly. So if you get one for a nurse, obviously they're going to be in the health MOU because they're a nurse. For ours and OES, they've always been administrative analysts. We've talked about a way to fix that. The problem is we need certain positions to be exempt, so the most you're going to do is get them in management because we don't have exempt in any other MOU right now. So we're working on this right now as a way to change that classification, like get them out of executive. But you would still need them to be exempt, right? Someone who's an OES has to be able to work after hours, weekends, and all of that kind of stuff. So we are looking at that. Is it going to make a huge difference? Probably
Right.
not.
I mean, at the end of the day, if they're 5 years or less, and like you said, a lot of them might move into a position that,
Yeah, and
I
remember,
get it. I'm just,
anyone
again,
over
this
960?
long-term liability thing is just,
anyone over 1,000 hours becomes PERS eligible. So even if you had someone part-time, they still become PERS eligible after 1,000 hours. So there's all of those criteria that we're jumping through to try and make sure we check all the boxes, determine where they go.
okay. And I guess my point is, at the end of the day, we have to, any position we can make less expensive to that liability is what I'm trying to figure out how to do.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay. So, I'd like to have the public weigh in here. And please note that, today's session, this is a presentation. Going down this road is very good, very positive. It's long overdue. Projecting out better is, definitely when we're looking at, trends and forecasts. So open it up for public comment. Please come forward. Welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of quick questions that are on my mind, and maybe it'll become questions on yours, and else I can find answers later. So one is, are the revenue and expense forecasts based on the current inflation and interest rates? Are we anticipating any, are we just taking what we currently have today and just projecting that that's not going to change over the next 2 years? Pretty much what we're doing, right? Okay, I'm sorry. Should be addressing the board. Okay, all right. That's, yeah, okay.
Okay, so rather than back and forth, the staff could answer that question. That would be appreciated.
So we're saying it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
It's a little bit of both, yeah.
Using your best judgment is what might happen.
Okay, thank you.
Because it could be significantly different in the future, hopefully. Okay, the Jamestown mine site cleanup cost, is that being carried by the citizens of the county, or is that shared with state and federal cleanup funds? Or did you already ask that question? I wasn't paying attention. Okay, I'm just wondering. It's a big number there.
That's not the only amount, though.
Yeah, it's your tax dollars.
There are private people, owners, who also contributed to the remediation that is part of that fund, but the largest part and the future, because it doesn't end there, the future is also the county.
So it is
your tax dollars.
It's part of this picture forever, right?
It's a huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering what we do differently in the future to maybe help mitigate, change that. I don't know.
Don't buy mine sites.
Okay, no gold mines. Doggone it. All right. Okay. And then actually Supervisor Campbell, I think, asked the question already about the impact of the Law and Justice. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was Supervisor Goldenberg. The impact of the Law and Justice Center. And is there anything we can do on that to help us in the future do something different than what's happening to us now?
So as I stated before, lessons learned, right? This is costing the county, the citizens of this county, a lot of money. Yeah. And so in the future, hopefully there'll be a big, long pause before making some of those decisions to understand all the ramifications.
And there's really nothing that we can do to okay, make
that
that better. Okay, and then my last comment. We're completely and fully dependent on our largest industry here, tourism and visitation. So we need to consider that the top priority after public safety, in my estimate. I think that's our path forward. So we've got to figure out how to maintain the investment and the energy behind that.
It's a huge part of our
as we start
economy.
Slicing and dicing. Yes,
Thank
sir. You.
Okay, thank you. Additional public comment. Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board just for comments. And if you did have an additional question, go ahead. Oh, wait a minute. Our sheriff's coming up.
Sorry, Supervisor, I was checking on my.
Yeah, no worries. Yes, sir.
Dave Vasquez, Sheriff of Tuolumne County. I just wanted to add a quick comment about the last comment that was made about the dam backer detention facility, and I know there was a little bit of dialogue. I can offer a little bit of context on some things that we are doing to offset that. I'm working very closely with county administration and board, as you're aware, to repurpose some of the square footage in that facility to benefit the greater good of the community, specifically for our 911 dispatch center. So what we're doing is we're trying to utilize county-owned property, county-owned buildings, facilities, so we're not having to inherit more debt or any other cost to the community by repurposing a portion of that building. We are in the works. There's a lot of moving parts to it, but I think at the end of the day, it's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, so we can utilize that existing infrastructure for the greater good of this community, for 911 infrastructure specifically. So that is something that we're currently doing. We reached a point where we needed to reinvent how we use that facility, and I think this is going to be one of the best ways to do so. Again, it's a team effort, and there's a lot of moving parts, but we're hopeful.
Yeah, thank you very much for daylighting that, for the public especially to understand, but also for, our board members and staff, of course. But yeah, any efforts that we can do to, utilize our space, better, if it's there, and especially with the, huge concerns over the dispatch center as it stands now. So,
of course. Yeah, I think it's a win for the community and for our county for sure, if we can make it happen.
yeah, very good. Thank you. Any additional public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the board. Yeah, we're just going to push forward, and I think we're close here, and we'll end this, and then we'll be able to adjourn the meeting after. So, additional comments? Supervisor Brandon, go ahead.
Great, thank you. We covered a little bit of the stuff. I had some recommendations. Again, thank you for putting this together. I think this is something to continue building on and that we need to continue investing in. What we've done with our budget for OpenGov is an excellent example, I think, of what we should be doing for our long-term financial planning and explaining this in that narrative sense. So a few recommendations I wanted to make and hopefully get the board's support and feedback on. I think one of the main things in all of these cases is trying to separate out, with our best judgment, what is mandated from what is sort of mandated to what is truly discretionary. I think those are three important distinctions. Again, having county council may not be mandated, and yet it kind of is semi-mandated with the workload that is there, as opposed to what we may do for the park study, which I think is a good idea, but something that's discretionary. Wanted to recommend that within the general fund, services and supplies, this would be hard to do in a slideshow, but I like the idea of a cascade chart similar to what we have in OpenGov that first is able to call out major investments that we've made. One was, for example, cybersecurity. It's not really an extra. That's not that different than a utility. Then separating out mandated costs from discretionary costs. And within discretionary, being able to divide those up by category. I have these written down too, by the way, so good you're writing it down, but I'll also send you the thing. I think that would be really helpful to understand that, at least by my guesstimate of all the ones we've reviewed, most of those things are mandated. They're often replacements because we don't have the staffing to cover something. So us keeping our staffing low often means that we have more contracted work. But really showing how much of that actually is we just want to go investigate or do something. I think the percentage is small, but I think we have to prove that to the public. I'd like to see an area chart when it comes to PERS, what is able to talk about the unfunded liability roughly, like the term quick and dirty with it. And we're not looking for the exact dollar value, but showing tier 1, 2, and 3, the volume of the outstanding debt over a few years, how tier 1 is going to be closing at some level in a projection, and how that is being replaced and how that affects the total. I think that would be really helpful to show those differences. Yes, but having also the total liability, not just the payments. Oh, okay, great. And then color coding the same thing between, I think, public safety and then our regular members. I think it would be really helpful, mentioned earlier, to have a chart on reserves, contingencies, and general fund balance similarly, year to year, that's able to show that. And perhaps a line there of where our budget policy would expect to see the reserve, so we can see progress we're making, but also how far we were. And I know back to based on what you present, I mean, we did not have a lot when I first joined the board, but I don't know what it looked like in 2010. I assume it was extremely low, and I don't know if in 2015 it went up. So knowing our reserves over time and when did we draw on them, I think would be very valuable public info. I think there's a few opportunities for category narratives. I heard, I think, comments on that about, how do we provide some of the relevant context? The ones that come to my mind is PERS, say the pepper change. I remember Manteca when I was in high school going bankrupt in some of the cities. There was a big crisis. There were legislative changes that addressed some of that, and yet we are still dealing with the consequences of contracts that were signed, right? Effectively money that's owed, even if we're not contributing to that problem at the same level as was in the past. PERS is one. Roads is another. There are several major state changes and local changes that happened. The cuts that were done, I think, in around 2010 era, SB 1 passing, that would tell the story of why they're in a difficult spot. 3 others would be public safety, fire, and TOT. I think those are the ones people most commonly ask, how did we get here? What were the major pain points? I know I answer this over and over and over. Each one of those probably at least a few times a month, if not more. I think it'd be really helpful. I liked actually the narrative storyboard talking about some of the events. I think it needs to not just be relevant to sales tax, but I think having a county timeline where we have each year some of the key things that happened would be really helpful. So, mentioning the Donnell fire, mentioning the COVID pandemic, the Great Recession, that would be helpful. It's maybe less relevant to this, but that'd be a great thing to live on our website over time. One thing that is commonly asked is the conversion of grant-funded positions to full-time general fund funded positions. It is, over the past 3 years, not something that's happened a lot that I've seen. I would like to prove that that is true, that it is actually a pretty low number. Oftentimes when we say we've created a number of grant-funded positions, the next question is, whether they remained grant-funded or if the grant ended, did we transition to another grant program or did they become full-time employees? Is that, not to use the word ploy, but a ploy basically. And then last bit, I wanted to agree with Supervisor Kirk somewhat on what was mentioned with protection, just to throw into that I think we need to be specific with defining in these things, public safety, law enforcement, and say the sheriff's office as 3 examples at 3 different levels with, decrease or more increasing specificity as it kind of goes down. Highlighting too that when we've had money, and I know we have a revenue measure on the ballot, we have put in extra money into reserves, double the budget policy. We've put extra money towards the pension debts, and we've paid most of the rest of it towards, if in one-time money, deferred maintenance, and in ongoing money to public safety, which I think reflects the county's priorities. But we have to figure out a better way to actually get that message out there because nobody watches these meetings. Most people that do are going to be county staff, maybe media, a few political nerds in the community that really care about it. We're not reaching people that are living their lives too busy, but our voters are a part of this and need to understand at least the highlight reel. I had a couple of long-term things. These weren't so much questions, but sometimes they come up. So I think we really need to review the A87 costs and internal billings across every department. A reality is general fund money right now is more precious based on the mandates that are being pressed on us and the needs. And so we need to look at where we can increase and have more full cost recovery on that. And I know we have a lot of services that are provided. I don't know if we're collecting on average 20 or 30% or 100% when it comes to legal counsel, financial services. I'd like to see options brought back to look at non-general fund sources and are we adequately billing those for what we are providing. I know that's a hard conversation, but I think we need a buffet of options. Another is I think we need to bring back options for the self-insurance proposal. I think liability insurance is getting crazy. I would rather spend it on repairs and have an internal service fund, but I'm not sure it's wise for us to participate anymore in the insurance market as it stands right now, and as those costs are rapidly rising. I wanted to throw out again, too, that I think we have to bring back a proposal, especially with fire investments, for medical call reimbursements. It's something I've been asking for 3 years. I think it's very relevant to this since one of the major cost drivers coming up is fire service. And that is a major component of some 80 to 85% of the calls that people are going out on. And the last bit that I wanted to bring up is as we have our contracts coming up in bargaining, I think we need to take a serious look at compaction issues, because every time we seek to address issues with frontline employees, minimum wage issues, deputies on patrol issues, and we give that an increase, we are in these contracts which move it all the way up the food chain and lead to what a lot of the public sees as administrative pay or supervisorial pay that is too high. And I would like to be able to say we are investing where we want people to be at a living wage. And I think a lot of the leaders in our departments are saying for their teams that that's where it needs to be. But in order to do that at the level it needs, I'm not sure that we can handle that level. So I think that's something we need to keep in our minds, is looking at compaction of the contracts. Another very hard discussion, but something that would untie our hands a little bit in being able to address some of these pay issues. We shouldn't have any employees at the county that are offering services to the community that they themselves have to use just to be able to make ends meet and pay. But also where we've got a median, pay roughly of $75,000, that it makes it very difficult to work within that area. So, would love to get the board's feedback on some of those charts, but I guess the closing thing is I want this to tell the story to the public of what we got here, and to be very honest and not try to make us look good or past boards look good, but to say that most of the time when people do explore this stuff, there are very rational, real explanations for the decisions. And I think, as Supervisor Campbell said, there are little things around the periphery that people may disagree with, but on the core issues, it's really people doing their best in a difficult situation. So when we ask for help, we need to get that trust back that actually your local government is working very hard for your tax dollars and providing you a really great value.
Supervisor Campbell.
Okay, as it was said, I think this is a good overview of where we are in a financial place. I think the way that we could simplify it more is by looking at the total costs and revenues shown together in as succinct as way as possible. So, the implied reason we're doing this is that it's clear that there's a revenue shortage area, and so then the discussion becomes, how do we fill that? Do we look at tax measures? There's a sales tax that's going to be going on the ballot. Do we look at cutting services? I've definitely observed just in the past few years how much higher demand for services amongst the community than I ever expected in a rural county like ours. So those two things don't mesh well. Expecting more services and also expecting us to have low taxes and low revenue in a rural county, that's not sustainable. And this makes that clear. And so I think taking that a little bit more from an implied purpose to a explicit purpose for this, I think is something that the public would benefit greatly from, because it's our jobs to know these things and to delve into the details and to have discussions about where our priorities lie. Most people in the community are living their lives, they're trying to make ends meet, and they don't have the time to get into granular detail about these things, and they just want to know, are we spending their tax money responsibly? What level of services are we able to supply with those funds? And if those two things aren't meeting, what are we going to do about it? And so I think we're at a point where we're answering that question. So I personally, I think that I don't expect that many services in a rural county. If I was expecting, perfect roads and all these different things. I would live in a, gated community somewhere in the valley where you pay, hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month for HOA fees and that type of thing. But that just doesn't exist in our county. And we need to be clear and we need to be honest about that and what the cost of something like that looks like, because it doesn't happen by accident. It happens with planning, and it happens with the consent of the governed of our community. So I think we have a good understanding of the numbers here, and we need to make it as public as possible.
Very good, thank you. Supervisor Kirk.
Yeah, I'll kind of state what I stated earlier, which is this is going to be a really good tool moving forward. So I'm excited that we're doing this, that we're fine tuning it. Kind of on that note, I don't know if I need to bring it back before the board or whatnot, but I kind of want to make this part of our budget policy that we do this exercise once a year to make sure that we stay up on it, we stay fresh, we keep the charts, everything organized. I think it's that important. So I don't know if I need to present an item, Tracy, or whatnot, but do I need to do that, or can we just say, yeah, let's add it to the budget policy or bring it back so we can?
You could provide direction today, so if you have two others who'd like to join that, then
So do I need to make a motion for this?
Well, it's not on there as a motion, but you could just provide direction to return in the future with a conversation about that, and we can incorporate. But the agenda language today is not for language. It's discussion and presentation.
I like the idea.
Why don't we take this one right now so we can put it to bed? Look into the balance of the board here. I'm personally in favor of doing this. I think it's very worthwhile. And just look for concurrence so that we can give direction.
Supervisor, could you restate again what you're asking for?
Just at the very least, I was pushing for like a quarterly or biannual conversation, conversation about this. But what I was advised was it's really hard to get a clear picture until you get actuals. So I will look to the three of you guys, biannual, annual. What would be the best bang for the buck and appropriate? Can I do biannual?
I think the best way to we're not, we can give you actuals as a certain date of time, but it's still going to be projections if you want a full year. Or if we do it as part of the adopted budget, when auditor closes and we get fund balances in August, we could bring it in as soon as we have that and give you updated on all the finals. That would.
Why don't you make it part of when we bring in the final fund balance?
That's what
if you do June. If you don't do June and you do the final in September,
yeah.
Do it in September.
Yes, so we can make it work as soon as they close, which is usually the latter part of August. As soon as they close, then we can update all of it. It won't take long to update once we have the finals, then we can bring it in.
Because I feel like if we did it biannually, they would be pretty close together based on budget. So let's just do it.
Yeah, and they'll still be estimates because you won't have, you'll have actuals to a certain point, but we'll be projecting again to get to what that year might look like. So if you wait until they close, we'll have actuals that next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
are we talking
we're gonna do it
biannual, once a year, or biannual?
And let me clarify a little bit. As a board, I just want to be clear. As a board, would it be foolish to wait until the end for projections, or should we actually be seeing this? Should we be seeing this earlier before budget?
I was just going to go there as well because even though the information
Tell me, let's talk. I want to make the best informed decisions.
Okay, how about if
when's the best time to get this information?
you could do something, say, in March or whenever the mid-year is done. You would use the actuals for the previous two back years. And then you look at, it's still going to be like Tracy's saying, it's going to be an estimate, but you could look at the budget in the system at that point in time. So any changes that the board's done, people have come for unanticipated revenue, whatever you're going to do for the mid-year, you can change that. Just recognize that the budget is going to be higher than what the norm's going to be. And then come back in September when the true fund balance is brought in, or if you go back to doing your final budget in September at that point in time. So you'd have the recommended, most of the numbers other than actuals will be brought up, the PERS will be in there, all of that. And then in September, you would then true up everything, if that makes sense.
Yeah. When you were talking, I was hearing more of like a June, September, but I'm hearing March, September is a biannual, which would be a good.
I think if you brought it in March to give everybody a picture before they started doing the budget, the next year's budget, again, the current year would be estimates, but the other two will not. And then you true it up when either you do the final budget if it's in September, or the final fund balances if that's in September.
So that would be
If that makes sense.
Yeah. That'd be my thoughts. March, September.
I wanted to add to it too. I think we have a finance committee that under its purview, something like this fits very well. So I think the idea of having it as a presentation for budget to the board is good. I think having a finance committee that's able to talk about specifically some of these things is good. I would like to see this, though, not just stop at being a once-a-year presentation to us. I think a dashboard, and we've talked a lot about that on homelessness, on our budget effort. There are services that are able to take this and put it into a digestible format for the public. And I think that's some work that the Finance Committee could look into. What's relevant? What do we want to track? Be able to show the spreadsheet data that we already have, but have it in some format that is easy to understand. And that can be ongoing throughout the year. So we may update it once a year when we get the actual numbers, but people are able to see it a little easier.
On a finance committee, I know we used to have one. What would that? Because I'm sorry, I like the idea of meeting, but I don't like the idea of another committee.
So we're kind of getting off track here as far as.
Okay, so let's go back to the March, September. We're in agreement with.
Thank you.
So we'll do that, and then what you're bringing up.
We still have a finance committee. It exists.
Yes, it does.
But does it?
I just
does
want
it
to
meet?
point out to the board that we probably shouldn't be debating certain direction. Because this is just a presentation, it's probably best just to have commentary member by member and then keep it at that. But that's what I want to avoid for this item.
So my commentary would be I'm supportive of a, what was it, March, September?
Or September, yeah.
So this comes before decisions that substantially impact our future budget-making decisions. Because I think getting a financial picture before we have to, once we know, okay, how much money do we have, how much money are we going to have, that's really going to influence whether I decide to do more projects or less projects, or support more projects or less projects.
Okay. Thank you for your commentary.
Thank you. You're welcome.
And your commentary,
Okay.
your commentary.
Any
5 commentaries.
Any additional, Supervisor Campbell? Did you have anything further? Okay. I'll just close with a couple of general comments, and we've gone back and forth on this before.
I wasn't done. If you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Go
it's
ahead,
okay.
Supervisor.
I can wait. You can go, and then I can. jump back in.
Good. Go
Okay.
ahead.
And then Debbie, or this is kind of the reason why I want the general fund stuff pulled out of the PERS fixed liability is I'd kind of, and specifically, and I'm just let the board know where I'm going with this and why, but I really want to know how much of our law enforcement is part of that liability, because I want to take those numbers, and I have a few contacts up at PERS, and a few legislators I just wanted to talk with. So if I could get that information.
We have that already. And the clean part, your safety is 100% general fund.
Yeah.
We used to have a investigator at DSS, but we don't have that investigator there anymore. So the safety unit is 100%
Right. But
general
if
fund.
60% of that liability is general fund, how much of that 60% is specifically law enforcement? That's what I want to.
I have that all scheduled
Cool.
out. It's done.
So I'm going to get that. I'm going to go to PERS. I'm going to talk to some legislators I have.
Okay.
I just want to have a conversation.
When I'm talking the 60%, I'm talking about the miscellaneous group. The safety group, one more time, 100% of it is general fund.
Right. What I'm saying is of our PERS fixed liability and our PERS fixed payment, I want to know what the law enforcement.
It's all scheduled out already.
Cool. Thank you. Okay. So we'll get that. That's what I'm going to do with that information. And then I would agree with what Supervisor Brandon said about, and maybe I didn't bring this up. I don't know if I did, but the mandated costs associated within the general fund. I think that definitely, if you could, Liz, add that, that needs to be called out one way or another. And then I think what I want to summarize and say with all this is we don't know how things are going to go in November. I just want to be clear. Did our board kind of like push pause on what the plan is until after November? Because when I look at Outlook number 1 and I see what's coming, remind me, did we give direction to just kind of pause until November, until we decide as far as what the plan will be?
Yes, pretty much, because you can't decide a budget now that you wouldn't have to vote on again in November. So we said was once the
Sorry, not budget, but we got to start coming up with some solutions quick. So are we going to start doing that come November once we see what happens? Is that the idea?
That was the idea, yes, was to do it before January.
Okay. So we're still on track for that. All right. That's it for my comments. Thank you.
So a couple of last comments I had, one on reserves. The suggestion based on the numbers would say 14 million. That's a tough number to get to. On the other hand, I think we should be up at least to 10 million. If we're going to have something that's worthwhile, so that if we have a bad turn, we've got something that we can go to that has some real money in it. Not to be used frivolously, of course, but when you need it. And just in general, there's unknowns. Bargaining's coming up with all units. There's going to be a lot of discussion there, which the board will be well involved in. And my last comment, again, just looking at, various numbers when we talked about the TOT, was based on, I think, said 75% rate. Again, I would look to reach out to the Lodging Association and just kind of see where they're at. Some properties, obviously, when they're just getting started, might not be a little slow going to get up there, but there's an awful lot. Of course, the entrance into Yosemite is making life difficult for a lot of visitors, right? And I mean, everybody knows this. However, even if that gets sorted out in a little bit more meaningful way, and I know that the National Park Service is certainly trying, there's still millions of visitors going there, and we don't have millions of rooms. And if they're not going to get into Yosemite, so I would just like to look at those numbers again, because if they come in higher, that's a benefit. Other than that, I don't have anything further, so I want to thank everybody for the work in putting this together and flexibility in answering our questions. It was a good presentation. Really, really appreciate it. So with that said, did I lose my mic? Okay. With that said, before we adjourn, I'll look to the board member as far as reports. We've got another meeting coming up on Tuesday. I know that Supervisor Brandon just got back from NACO, and we'd love to hear from that, but he's just gotten back, and he could probably use a little bit of time to get something together to give us the highlights. So
I'd be fine to give an update. I'd rather just do it Tuesday when we have everybody. So.
Yeah, let's plan on doing that. Supervisor Campbell, are you good with reports until Tuesday?
Power keeps going out in my district. That's my report.
Okay.
And I can't go to Pinecrest without locals yelling at me and almost threatening me because they're sick of Pinecrest. So
everybody's complaining about the heat, but wait till you have to deal with heat and humidity. So coming back thankful.
So I'm talking to U.S. Forest Service and the sheriff and some other folks. I'm hopeful after 5 years, maybe we can come up with something.
Yeah, I saw some of your comments that were in emails, and it looks like a good way to proceed. All right. And so we will adjourn our meeting at 12:27. Thank you, everybody, for attending.